Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and a huge welcome to Produce, Mix, Fix, and Conquer. So we're super excited to be joining today with Mr. Warren Huart, as we all know from Produce Like a Pro. And as many of you know, Warren needs no introduction whatsoever. He's an incredible educator. He's also been an incredible producer and engineer for many years. So we're super excited to be asking Warren some questions today. Do feel free as well to join the live feed and share the live with your friends and send through questions to Warren as we chat away about his amazing world. So without further ado, Mr. Warren Huart. Hey, Warren, how you doing?
Hey, I must say, I'm incredibly impressed with your intro music, Connor. Did you hear all of that? We've got to upgrade. I wrote that little piece on our videos about like 6 years ago, and I think it was like recorded and mixed on a laptop in about an hour. And now I'm listening to yours, and it's like this really cool like loop. And then the second piece comes in, and the visuals. I'm like, Connor, we got to up our game here,
Oh, thanks, man. We're just a little community compared to you guys, but no, it's so great to have you on, though, Warren. It's absolutely awesome, man. We'd love to have a chat to you today as well. Obviously, start stuff like we've done with the rest of our guests. We've been so honored to chat to professionals like yourself over the last few months about maybe the start of your journey as a kid. So maybe let's start at the beginning, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, totally. You said you were in Manchester. Where were you born originally?
Nottingham. I'm a Nottingham lad originally.
Ah, so, yeah. Nottingham. Are you a Forest fan?
I'm a Forest fan. Yeah, so you can't call me a Glory supporter, that's for sure.
No. I mean, I'm of the age when I was a little kid, Forest were amazing.
Yeah,
because they had Brian Clough when I was a little kid. Yeah. I mean, those people that are probably glazing over with this quick bit of football talk, Nottingham Forest were European champions. I mean, there was a period for about 4 or 5 years where they were the best club in the world. So yeah.
We never still have our never. 2 stars. No, we still have our 2 stars on our badge, to be fair. So for winning 2 European championships, I think it's 79 and 80 that we won. It's slightly before my time. But what about your team, Warren? Who are you a fan of?
Well, this is probably going to open a whole can of worms. See, at Chelsea supporter, born and bred. My grandfather, father, me, my son, my great grandfather. My great grandfather was one of the original investors. Now that sounds really posh. However, Chelsea was started at an old age pensioners home, and I think the original investment was about the equivalent of a modern £100. So it was like it was not a wealthy club. It was they used to be nicknamed the Pensioners for like the first 20 years. Yeah, that's Chelsea's original nickname, was the Pensioners. And there was no, they didn't have any meteoric rise. They weren't, so anyway. But yeah, I still follow it. I think one of the things about living in America or living in another country, for anybody that's relocated, you find that you sort of become more attached to, things from home that, that you can share with your friends in. And I always followed football as a kid, just like every kid does at school. Everybody had a team. But now that I'm here, I watch it more often than I did when I was in England. So just, because it's my connection to home. Plus I watch all the cricket. If you know anything about me, you can see there's a cricket ball there.
Amazing. So have you ever been to Trent Bridge though, Nottingham? Have you ever?
Of course, I've been to them all, over the years. I used to live in Carlisle in the north of England. I played in club bands and stuff. And
cool.
So when I was there in the north, I would go over to Yorkshire, down in Nottingham, cross and down and see test matches. I was probably 16 or 17 years old, and I loved it. I mean, those were the days in the 80s when I was like 16, in the mid 80s. That was the days of both of them. So that was like a good time to be into cricket. Just great players. But it's great. They're great again now, though.
Completely.
Yeah. They're doing great. But so it's an interesting one. I've been asked about this one a few times, obviously, but I think one of the biggest things that shapes me, there's the story I always used to tell when I first started getting interviewed, like I did Pensado's Place like 6 years ago. And he always talks about his family being very musical and artists and, artisans and all this kind of stuff. And my family weren't musical, but they loved music. And my father was a painter and a sculptor. So I was very blessed that he used to play a lot of music in the house, and he was very, you know, even though we were very, very poor, to be quite blunt, we didn't have any money, but you know, because we're just living on the money that an artist makes. I always joke it's like, you know, having a dad that's a bass player in a local band, you know. But anyway, what was great was like just a great arts background, the fact that, you know, all of that stuff was highly valued. And it's interesting because even then, you know, in the 80s, that was out of step. I mean, I'd go to school and I lived in a nice little southern, you know, Hampshire village and stuff like that. So, you know, all the stereotypes of sort of idyllic kind of childhood, but none of my other friends' parents were listening to like classical music and jazz. So I was always a little bit out of step. And as a child, I absolutely pathologically hated it. I always felt like I was kind of the odd one out. We lived in a wealthy area, but we were super poor, but everybody around us had loads of money. You know, my mother hates me saying this, but I'm going to say it, you know, to make ends meet, she used to clean the neighbors' houses. Wow. So it creates a weird sort of tension when you're at school and you're kind of the poor kid and your mum's like the cleaner, you know, doing housekeeping for the neighbors. But what it did do is it gave me a little bit of a sort of like an inverted snobbery. So I ended up, you know, working twice as hard as the kids got everything given to them for free. I mean, it's fine. I'm still friends with some of those kids, but you know, I had friends that would be like, you know, Daddy, I want a guitar for Christmas, and you know, and a Les Paul Custom's like their first guitar. You know, Daddy, I want an amplifier. You know, Marshall Stack. You know, you know, where my father and I built my first guitar. Now, don't get me wrong, he did 99% of it. It's very, very, you know, and there's a lot of things. You know, I was a huge Queen fan, so I wanted to be Brian May, and Brian May built his first guitar with his dad as well. So there was a lot of that. You know, me trying to be Brian, and I mean, I grew up a huge Queen fan. That was the music I was allowed to listen to as a kid because my dad deemed it. You know, he gave me a Night at the Opera as a Christmas present. Nice. And, you know, because most of our Christmas presents he would make, you know, because he was a really good craftsman, you know, he could build things. He'd make us toys and stuff like that. So I never felt like super poor or anything, but every now and then he would buy something to add to it. And one of those was, of course, you know, a Night at the Opera. And he gave it to me and said, "This is worthy."
Amazing.
So, you know, and when you're super little, you know, remember what it's like when you're really, really little, anything your father said is gospel, you know. It's not until you get to like 11, 12, 13 that you start going, these parental units, they don't know what they're talking about. But at the age he gave it to me at like 6 or 7 or whatever it was, I was just like, okay, whatever you say. And I remember he had these huge Sony headphones, like these old-fashioned 70s headphones. Like everything we had was like hand-me-downs from my grandparents. Like when I left home at 16, like we're talking late 80s, my parents still had a black and white TV.
Love it. Brilliant.
And that was given to them by my granddad, who had bought a color TV. My dad's dad gave us took the color TV, gave us the black and white one. So all of those things at the time were a little annoying. You know, you go over to friends' houses, they had big screen TVs. We had a little tiny black and white one, you know, at least as big as you could get in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, and they had all of the accoutrements and all of the great things that you could have. But I think without that, I wouldn't be sitting in a studio with an SSL and all this, you know, $500,000 worth of gear that I bought from working hard. You know, with the exception of a handful of pieces of gear, this is the same. You can go back and look at my first video and this video and this video here, and you'll see, there's some additional stuff that's come in, and some of it I've got good deals on from manufacturers, but 99% of what I use every day is what I bought from doing this for a living. You know, I'm not a professional YouTuber. You know, I am actually a producer, engineer, and a mixer, you know.
Amazing. Thanks so much, though. And it's so cool you mentioned about your dad as well. Because my dad's a drummer, but also he got me into guitar as well as a young kid. But it's like an old 1970s guitar, but he also gave me like a 1960s Jimi Hendrix fuzz face. I don't know if you've got a fuzz face knocking around the studio.
I haven't. I wish I did. Those are amazing.
They were absolutely brilliant. And literally, kind of, he just put it through. I don't know why. Rather than his little amp, he put it through the stereo. I think it might have potentially almost blown the stereo, to be fair. But again, as an 11-year-old kid, you know, again, I was impressionable, like you said, you were as well. And it's like, I just thought, noise, great. You know, let's make some music. So with that in mind as well. So, like, when did you actually first pick up an instrument? So I know guitar is your instrument. Is that right?
Yeah, guitar's my main. I mean, I play everything at different levels. I always, you know, whenever I'm a guitar player, a bass player, a keyboard player, and a drummer. Yeah. like I'm a really bad drummer, but I play drums on loads of records. But you know, DAWs is my friend. You know, I can go. I can do the Pat Boons, the Debbie Boons. You know, the guitar players shuffle. You know, the one that every guitar player plays. So I know those kinds of grooves, and then I'll just edit myself to be a proper drummer. But yeah, I always go guitar player, bass player, keyboard player, drummer. You know,
absolutely know that feeling only too well. Oh, amazing.
But yeah, I just, you know, like I think I can just always go back. I feel like every disadvantage I've had has been a massive advantage. You know, it's overcoming those kinds of things that is just really huge. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have anything sort of negative to say about not having money as a kid. You know, I obviously want my own kids to have an easier time of it. It's funny. I was talking about this the other day. I don't know if you've started having kids yet. My daughter's still 4-year-old. My daughter's 7. My son's a little older, but my daughter's 7. And I said to somebody the other day, I actually, you know, I like being entrepreneurial. It fits my mindset. You know, the fact that I am 24 hours a day, every moment I'm awake, I'm doing something towards what we do. I'm communicating with our academy members, with, you know, answering Facebook, answering YouTube. That's me answering. I can be mixing a song and I'll still answer somebody's question. You know, I have guys that work for me like Connor, who you met earlier, but they're not answering the questions because only I can be me. You know, I can only impart. It's very difficult to train people to sound like you. I know. And anyway, so it's me. I answer the questions, and it's always been about building community. So you can't really build community by sort of pretending that it's a community and not really being that. You know. So you know, I'm very close to it. It means a lot to me. I don't feel like there's been any disadvantages in my life. But at the time, of course, you know, I thought, I wish I could have a Les Paul Custom like my friends. I wish I could have a second or third guitar, even, you know, like Strats and Telecasters and stuff. But I'll tell you one thing. I'll let you ask another question. I'm sorry, you know, I'm famous for this.
No, Warren, go for it, man. That's cool.
I'll tell you one other thing that was been really, really good growing up poor, surrounded by rich people. One of the best things is it gives me an appreciation for the companies that make good, affordable gear. I feel very strongly, and I don't mean this as an ego thing, but I feel very strongly that we as our community really helped a company like Cali, for instance. We were the first people they come along, they say, would you try our speakers? And I went, okay. So I did a review on them, and I'm like, these sound amazing. They're $300 for a pair, and they're powered. So, you know, so I'm going to get behind it. I mean, are they the best sounding speakers in the world? Of course not. They're $300. They're sitting next to a pair of $8,000 speakers. But they sound close enough. I can work on them and I can get behind them and talk about them, because that's the great thing about, you know, honestly, about being poor, surrounded by rich people, is you're finding things to kind of level the playing field within your sort of own, you know, own reality. It's another reason why I love Yamaha acoustics. I believe the LL16, which is like $700, is probably the best sounding acoustic anywhere in that price range. And cool. I love it. And now I go to Nashville, and every other Nashville studio owner I know has an LL16. And they're like, oh yeah, you put a mic on it, sounds like a Martin, only more even.
There you go. There you go. So, it's just incredible.
So I think it is. I think that's the thing that gives us. I mean, you know, look, you grew up in the North, so you understand what I'm talking about. That, you know, it's like, you know, it's, you know, you probably grew up with a whole namby-pamby Southerners kind of idea.
Not quite. No, it's really interesting that, though, to be fair. It's like, because like where I'm from Nottingham, you know, my parents didn't really have much money, but yet quite similar to you. I actually grew up in quite an affluent area as well.
Yeah.
So we always used to joke, and like kind of people would say, "Oh, I was originally from a place called Ravenshead near Nottingham," and people would always say to me, they go, "Oh, right, okay, so you've got like a Ferrari and a swimming pool." It's like, no, my dad's got a Skoda Rapid and a paddling pool. You know, so it's like, you know, and
wow, you had a paddling pool. You had a paddling pool. What? You were the rich kids.
Not quite. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, it's so cool though, man. But what about, okay, so obviously you've grown up a bit, and did you start playing in bands, did you, as well? Was that your next
yeah, I mean, I did all the usual thing. I had like school bands. So I didn't start playing. Sorry, you did ask what age I was. I didn't start till playing until I was 15. The weird thing was, right, okay. But I also think that's a massive advantage as well, because I was obsessed with music from the age of like 7 all the way up to 15 to picking up a guitar. Obviously, I'm still obsessed, but all I did was listen to music for that period of time. I collected records, and because, without harping on the whole don't have much money thing, but because of that, what I would do is you remember the Littlewoods catalogs and the Case catalogs?
Oh, do I? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd buy all my records in the back, because you could buy them in weekly installments. So I'd take my 50p pocket money and I would buy an album, and it was like £2 or something, or £3, but it was like 22p a week. So I'd say to my mum, I just bought this record, and it would be delivered, and she would make the payments of the 22p a week.
Amazing. Did you used to go to like the bargain bin as well? So I remember my dad used to take me in the 90s. It's like Andy's Records. I don't know if you can remember Andy's Records from the 90s. You might have been in LA by that point, possibly. But did you used to go into like the bargain bin as a kid as well, and just try and find bands that way in a record store?
Yeah, well, when I got, it's interesting because I was just thinking about this the other day. The great thing about the UK, and it's still like this, now, is that when you're a kid or a student, traveling by trains and tubes and buses is still ultra cheap. I mean, God bless the United Kingdom for that. And so what I would do is, and I was thinking about this the other day as well, because, my son's 14 now. When I was 14, I was, 13, I was getting on a train every day I had off and going up into London, and buying a return ticket for 70p. Because you could buy it like the save one day saver return, whatever the heck it was called, and a child's ticket. So I was getting a child's ticket and on the off-peak times, and you get in the train and it'd be like 3 people in your carriage, because nobody was traveling during the day. It was always packed in the mornings and the evening for people going in and out to work in London. So I would go up there, sometimes with a friend, but mainly on my own, and then go in there and then go to the Notting Hill Record and Tape Exchange, for anybody from the UK who remembers that, and go in there. And what they would do is they would put an album up for like £1.50. And then after like a week or two, because they had so much turnover of stuff, they would just flick back through, and if they see something that was marked and been marked there for like 2 weeks, they'd mark it down to £1. And a couple of weeks later, they'd mark it down to 75p, then 50p. And all I would do is go there regularly and kind of look through, and you'd open them all up and you try to find the best quality vinyl you could find at the cheapest price. And you keep going back. And then sometimes you would I remember finding All Things Must Pass by George Harrison, and moving it to a different part of the store. Till I had the money to pay for it. And I came back 2 days later, and luckily in the 2 days that I had been away, they hadn't gone to the Z section of Zappa, and put it back in the right place. And I was able to find it and buy it, with my now saved up £1.50 or whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, the bargain bins was incredible. I built up when I got obsessed by Hendrix when I was about 13. I built up my whole Hendrix collection from the record tapes, and I just it became, I think, in the 90s, the Notting Hill Record, Tape and Video Exchange. I don't know what's called now. Yeah. Does anybody here? Anybody here that remembers that? Yeah.
No.
To answer AJ, I mean, when I say editing myself, I don't mean gridding it. I just mean, taking bits that I didn't make mistakes in. Editing yourself is like when you're a average to bad drummer. I mean, average is an overstatement. I'm really playing myself. But when you're a bad drummer like me, you play the parts, you make a couple of mistakes, and you go, okay, this bar was good, I'll throw it in there. I didn't like that feel, I'll take that one. So, there's different ways. Editing is not a bad word. I mean, people edited on tape. Some of the biggest records that every finger wagging kind of baby boomer is telling, they never used to fix. Well, I actually have friends that made those records, and the heck did they? Talking to Jack Douglas, who made Aerosmith and John Lennon records and Who and all this stuff. Supertramp, who made all these records. Just like, we used to just good. Whatever we had to do. If you have to cut the tape and move something. If the kick was ahead, you just cut the tape. You'd move the whole drum track along, and then you splice it back in, and you did whatever you had to do. It's kind of a fallacy that we live in. We're like, hey, everybody was a genius in the 70s, and now you kids don't know what you're doing.
It's not true. I think it was. I'm sure you've seen. Is it? Oh, not Back and Forth. There's Sound City, the Foo Fighters film. Yeah. And I think it was Trent Reznor though that said that kind of obviously like computers obviously like taken over now. I'm paraphrasing here, but how modern music isn't as good as what it could be, maybe. Because we've got all this technology, but music isn't necessarily as good as what it was back then. But I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. Maybe it's
I don't know if it's necessarily true. I think what tends to happen, we're going to get into an interesting territory here. I think what tends to happen is we live in a popularist culture worldwide. It's not just America, not just Britain, not just Europe, not whatever. We live in populist culture. And the way to be successful in something, particularly online, is to take a very hardened view and then be very finger waggy about it and be like, and this kind of stuff. Because you're going to get, because of the wonderful world of social media, you're going to get more people following you if you say, for instance, that everybody uses a Mac computer, is using an overpriced whatever. That's going to be a popular thing. Every channel I know that's done an anti-Mac video has got 2 million views. Yeah. I don't care if you use a Mac or a PC. It doesn't really bother me. My son has a PC, I have a Mac, but it doesn't matter. But if you take that and say it, it's going to be, you're going to get, ranting. If you say, modern music is crap, you're going to get a lot of sort of, baby boomer age group, which I have no, I'm a Generation X. I've got no disrespect to baby boomers, but you're going to get a lot of baby boomers are going to be like, Led Zeppelin rule, everything else sucks. It's a great way to build an audience, but it's too partisan for me. I mean, if you know my channel, I mean, like I've done Joy Division, New Order, Billie Holiday today, Charlie Christian, awesome. Django Reinhardt, 10cc, The Cure. To me, it's like there's so many types of great music, and it's not one genre. It's certainly not one decade. It's certainly not one ethnicity. It's not one gender. It is everything. I've done Tapestry, Carole King. I've done Joni Mitchell Blue. I mean, we run gamut. And they only have one thing in common. They're all absolutely amazing pieces of music. Whether they're 2 chords or 200 is irrelevant, So for me, it's a big deal to like step away. As much as I love teaching technical skills, step away from it enough to remember that the people that made records we love were all teenagers, and maybe in their early 20s. I mean, when the Beatles broke up, I think George Harrison was turning 26, Paul was 27 and John and Ringo were either 29 or 30, and so we've got to remember that stuff. It can't be all about, being an expert, because one of the things that makes music so amazing is when you get people of any age, any gender, whatever, that come into a studio with kind of a lack of experience, but a passion to do something incredible and push the boundaries. And there's nothing wrong with the technology. In fact, in many ways, it allows more opportunity. The only thing stopping people is the creative juices, And one of the things that stops them, and I get emails every single day, is them going, well, I just watched a video that unless I understand what a Mixolydian, Phrygian, blah, blah, blah is, I won't know how to make music. I get emails every single day going, I'm just, I feel so confused. There's all this, like these experts telling me stuff, and I just have to feel them. And I'm going, no, it's fine. Can you play A minor and G? Great. Okay. Yeah. You just wrote Working Class Hero. You just wrote one of the best songs of all time. 2 chords. John Lennon would not have sat there and go, well, I think when I went from the Phrygian to the, so I think we just need to get back to that a little bit more. We need to level the playing field. remember that it's okay to be an expert in your field. It's okay to understand that you can boost and cut specific frequencies, these chord sequences. That stuff all great to know, but is not the most important thing in making music. When I asked Jeff Emmerich why he used an AKG D19, which is the famous, dynamic mic, we have one over there. He said, because it was plugged in.
Just bonkers. Absolutely bonkers, though, isn't it? Just crazy. But no, it's really interesting as well, as they mentioned about kind of like the past, like music from the past and that side of things as well. Like I said, the Beatles. So for my generation, it was Nirvana, that kind of changed the way that, I perceive music. And I remember I've told Tim Palmer, that I know you've interviewed Tim as well, lovely chap. And as I said to Tim, I actually listened to Nirvana and Pearl Jam. I didn't listen. I actually learned it from a tab book because my parents were super religious, is the only way to put it, and they basically no, you can't listen to any bands with swearing or that's aggressive or anything along those lines, and actually learnt those songs from the tab book before I actually even heard them.
Nice.
Which was bonkers, and Tim was there going, what, are you crazy? But that's the way I learnt those songs. But then the first time I actually heard like Smells Like Teen Spirit, that completely changed the game for me. But I've spoken to a couple of engineers about this, and they've said that if Nirvana was around now, would they have changed the musical landscape, or would they just be another punk band that's just like, there and for people to listen to the odd song? Would that actually change the landscape, those sorts of bands like Pearl Jam and Nirvana, if they came out now?
Well, the reason, there's many reasons why they were successful. That's a great period for me because that's when I first started getting into bands, was early mid 90s. My first record deal was technically it was 93 when I was a teenager, but my first major record deal was 94, 95. I played Reading Rock Festival. In fact, we played on the second stage during the middle of the day that the Foo Fighters headlined. And that was the first time they played Reading. And I remember 2 years before, I was there side of stage when Nirvana played, and Kurt came out with the pigtails on and being pushed out in the, in a wheelchair and all that stuff. So it was a great time for music. So those are my peeps, those are all Gen Xers up on stage making music. It's an amazing time. You had Nirvana, you're right, you had all of the grunge movement, but you also had Massive Attack, Portishead. What a time for music in the mid 90s. Blur, Modern Life is Rubbish came out, first so Oasis. We were blessed. It was a great time for music. And you go to festivals and you'd have heavy rock bands mixed in with dance bands on the same bill. Because popular music was so diverse and so exciting in that period. I think for America, it was a different kind of thing, because what America had was a very, very, especially pre-internet. We're blessed in the UK for having national radio stations. So with national radio stations, Radio 1 has to play music to cater to everybody's taste. I didn't realize until I moved to America that you had radio stations that only played one genre, which is great if you're educated in music and you know what you want to listen to. Then I'll go to the rock station, I'll go to the jazz station, I'll go to the R&B pop station. That's great. But if you're a kid, you can just only be tied into one thing. I played a show in Florida when I was in my mid-20s. I'm in America, I play a show, and some of the kids that came to the show got backstage afterwards, and I was hanging out. It wasn't a big show, it was just like a club show. And I started talking to them and saying, what bands are you into? And they were into classic rock bands. They were it was an all ages show, so about 18, 19-year-olds. I said, what? And they said, really big Lynyrd Skynyrd fans, because Lynyrd Skynyrd are actually from that area. And I was like, cool. So I said, do you like Marvin Gaye? And they went, who's that? And I was just, what? I couldn't believe it. I was like, I don't know a single person that likes music in the UK that wouldn't know who Marvin Gaye was. But then I'd just been fresh off the boat, and then I realized I'm driving. We're driving through Florida, and I'm flicking through 12 radio stations, and there was more classic rock. At least in those days, the mid 90s. Who knows now? But it was more classic rock and modern rock, and maybe we found a station that wasn't playing classic R&B and Motown at the time, but maybe that station at some point did. And I just realized, oh, this is a different world. You know, it's not like Radio 1 where it gets on at night, and there was like, back when I was a kid, probably when you were a kid still, you had John Peel, playing like indie stuff. You had Andy Peebles. You had like it was on major radio.
Yeah.
So and I think another thing that's tough for that Americans probably don't understand is that those radio stations' reach was enormous. When my band had our first single on Radio 1, they played us at drive time between 5 and 7. So that's everybody, because we're in one time zone in Britain for those people that don't know Britain well. So it's covering the whole country. And I asked them how many people are going to hear our song, and our label guy said 16 million people will hear your song. It's insane. There isn't a radio station in America that has that audience reach because they're regional. No. They don't have national radio stations like that. So you can't, and plus, with time zones, you can't have somebody leaving work at 5 p.m. in LA. It's 8 p.m. in New York. So you couldn't do it even if you wanted. So yeah, it's really insane. So I think we're very blessed coming from the UK and having that kind of diversity in music. At the same time, without getting too much up our butts about being from the UK, one of the things I love about America is, of course, the music. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't for all of the blues and jazz and R&B and Motown singers, we wouldn't be doing any of the music that we do. I'd say this to lots of people. Growing up in the UK, I listened to a lot of Black African American music and a lot of British music. Nirvana were the exception that came in, but that was sort of like most people's upbringing. You knew Marvin Gaye and Otis Redding, and you knew about Robert Johnson. You knew about where all the blues came from because of all the great kind of late 60s and 70s British blues rock bands all got from that. Yeah. So you knew all about that history. But I didn't know anything about Kiss until I moved to America. I'd seen photos of people wearing makeup, but I didn't know the music till I came here. It's a very sort of different. Now, all of this is meaningless because now we live in the wonderful world of the internet. So everything is everything is easy to discover. But back in those days, everything was so unbelievably regional. But your question, which I went off miles away from,
that's all right. That's cool.
was with Nirvana. It's like, I don't know, because what happened was Nirvana was like was the band that kind of sunk the deep juggernaut of a ship of like metal and glam metal and like pop glam metal that was like building all the way through the 80s. You had like the Motley Crues and all of these bands and the Dockens and the Warrants and the Cinderellas. And of course you had Bon Jovi and Aerosmith in there, which were international bands. But then you had these very American kind of bands, which is, the sort of Dockens, the Warrants, the Rats, the Cinderellas, those kinds of bands, which had occasional hits in other countries, but were very big kind of American phenomenon. And so Nirvana came along and just, I wouldn't say overnight, but pretty darn quickly, they completely reshaped the rock scene. So they're suddenly like having, teased out hair out here with shoulder pads on and makeup and stuff like that, was gone. And Nirvana came in. Now I'm friends with a lot of those guys from Seattle, a lot of those guys that played in bands at the time. And every single one of them will say, yes, they love punk rock. They definitely love punk rock. But most of them wanted to be Black Sabbath. And if you think about it, you think about the first couple of Black Sabbath albums, particularly the first one, it's pretty grungy. It's pretty amazing, but it's pretty grungy. And it's just like passion and riffs and like dumb enough to just speak. And also sort of very, very working class, very just like of the people. And Sabbath kind of really did that. And that's how I feel about grunge in a positive way. I feel like it's people's music. It was like, it was going against this kind of blown out, hair sprayed, big hair. Every video had girls in bikinis and Ferraris and, and living the beach life in Los Angeles or Miami. And suddenly you had like this band from this, Northwest, town, where it rained almost as much as it does in the UK, coming out and doing something really, really powerful. that was roots driven. And I don't mean like roots Americana. I mean just like back to the roots of just good old fashioned songs, because the songs are great. I mean, you know, Come As You Are, you know, Smells Like Teen Spirit. Those are songs you can sing. And I think that's the other thing. And there was no like extended, you know, half-hour guitar solos in them and all this stuff. It was back to basics. And I think that's where it resembles punk in many, many ways. By the way, has everybody read the new Dave Grohl book? It's really good.
I've been listening to it in the car.
I have too. I've been listening to it. Busted. When I said read, I mean it's already.
It's great. But just like hearing Dave just like kind of recite, you know, kind of what happened in the past and, you know, his like crazy legacy. They've entered, is it the, what did they enter the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Didn't they have it?
Yeah.
Very, very recently. Yeah. Foo Fighters. It's absolutely bonkers. It's so cool. So in your journey then, Warren, so Brian Cook on our community, he's worked with professional engineer, worked with some amazing artists like One Republic, but he sent me through a question for you, and he said with education, he just said that how did you get into being an educator, and is it something that came to you naturally being an educator, or was it a slow burning thing that you wanted to do?
I think when we started it, there was the first 2 years of running the YouTube channel, we didn't even put any ads on the videos. The only times there was ever ads on it, and still mainly today, is when there's other people's music in it and we have no control over the copyright. And you know, like I said, I work in the music industry, you know, and I've been in the music industry for most of my life. So, you know, when somebody wants to put an ad on a video because they own the music, I'm happy to oblige, because I'm not going to do a rant video. I can't believe they put ads on my videos. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The only reason why we exist, us guys and girls on this side of the glass, is because of incredible artists. So I'm not going to be like the guy that's going to complain about, you know, monetization. Demonetize me all you like. I'm trying to help people. I'm not trying to make a living off of YouTube ad rev, you know.
Sure.
It's a different thing. So if the artist goes out and makes $1,000 off a really successful video, good, because that $1,000 trickles back down. The more money they make, the more records we get to produce, the more artists we get to do. It's the way it works. I pay for my Spotify. I don't use the free one. You know, I don't care. I've always bought music. You know, to me, music has value. So any way that an artist can get rewarded, I'm with it. You know what I mean? I'm never going to complain about an artist, you know, monetizing anything we do. So we didn't run any ads at all, but ads were appearing because we're using other people's music, which is fine. Music I produce. And I just realized from doing this that it was an educational quotient, because I was just showing what I do every day. You know, what I do is make music. We just finished an EP with Mark Martell.
Nice.
You know, Mark, he was the singer in Queen Extravaganza. He does a lot of the voices in the movie, you know, all this stuff. And he's a phenomenal singer. And he's also a wonderful guy. So we just finished an EP with him. And then we did, and we've got an album to mix. What else are we working on? We're working on something else I'm completely blanking on. Oh, and I'm about to start an EP with another artist, and just mixing songs here and there. And of course, I get to do demos with mics and stuff, and I get to record songs from scratch. And what's so fun about that is I get to play the instruments. You know, usually I get a better drummer in, and sometimes a better keyboard player like Steve, of course. But I get to play guitar, I get to play bass. Sometimes I get to sing, even though I'm as a singer. But all the time I get to be creative. I mean, Connor will attest. I've been answering emails and been doing calls all day. Also, with the exception of this interview, with a guitar in my hand, practicing. Amazing. It's just what I do. I just sit there, you know, I'll put it back down. I'll just sit there and go.
Wow. Great.
And that's it. That's what I do all day. So I'm sitting there answering questions, emailing, practicing scales, stuff like that. To me, it's like, actually, Pensado and I had a good chat. The one I did with him about 7 years ago was like one of my first ever kind of interviews on camera and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what he asked me, I thought was really good. It was a statement he made. It's completely him, but it was so good. Yeah. He's like, you either you're either in the music industry doing music, I'm paraphrasing them, of course, but in the music industry completely obsessed, or you're not. There is no like, yeah, I just kind of like casually do this or whatever. If you want to make any kind of living at doing this, you have to be in it. You have to be obsessional about it. And it's just Lee saying that's actually true, always playing guitar. I probably enjoy him. I actually had a couple of calls with him today, and I was practicing arpeggios.
Oh, brilliant. Hi, Lee. Love your shot, by the way. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, so cool. Is it Lee Chapman from, am I right in saying, is that Lee? Does he run a guitar shop? Is it Anderson? No, I'm thinking of Anderson's. I'm thinking of Lee Anderson. That's who I was thinking
of. I'm friends with Lee Anderson as well. I used to work at Anderson's when I was a kid.
Did you? Oh, right.
Yeah, I used to work at Anderson's, yeah. Right. I used to work at two music shops. I worked at one called Kingfisher Music, which was in Fleet, which is the nearest town to where I grew up. I grew up in Crookham Village, and Fleet was the nearest town. So I worked at Kingfisher. And then actually Lee poached me. He came into the shop one day and said, I like what you're doing. Or he sent somebody in, I can't remember. Then he came to my house and he brought in this massive questionnaire, and I had to fill out all this questionnaire in a certain period. He went back, analyzed it, and said, I want to offer you a job. And really? I came over and worked with him. It was a lot of fun. We were both like in our early 20s, we're about the same age, and we were both single, early 20s, doing all the things that you do, playing guitars, drinking too many beers in the local pub, and chasing after girls. I will happen to say very unsuccessfully. I was never and never have been and never will be a Lothario. No, I have no game.
Fair play to you, Warren. Oh, and thanks so much for that as well. So at that sort of time, or maybe it might have been a bit later, but why did you make the move to LA then? What was it that drew you to LA?
I was in a band.
Oh, cool.
I was in a band, and we came over to do a record with Don Smith, God rest his soul. Great guy, Don. Don was his right-hand guy for a bunch of really great records. So Don was and Don Smith, the Dons, they got to make Steel Wheels, the Rolling Stones. They also made he was engineered with Steve Jordan producing, I believe, like Expensive Winos records, which is all of the Keith Richards solo records, like Main Offender. That's Don Smith's engineering on that. Don had also done a lot of the 80s, done a lot of the 80s Tom Petty. So he did like Last Dance with Mary Jane and stuff like that. He'd also, they'd done the Divinals, Touch Myself, I Want You to Want Me. He'd been the mixer on that. He was like so diverse. But at that point, we really wanted to work with him. My band wanted to work with him because he had done Cracker, Kerosene Hat, which if you're a grunge fanatic, you'll remember that song. I'm so alone, I feel like being stoned. And it had, what was the name of the actress in the video? Come on, Americans, help us out.
Oh, man, yeah.
Sandra Bernhard. Sandra Bernhard was in the video. Black and white video, and Sandra Bernhard was being, all Sandra Bernhardt-ish in the video. It was pretty amazing. It was a lot of fun.
Brilliant. So what actually inspired you to start off the YouTube channel then? What was it that clicked in your brain? That was obviously, I know that producing and engineering is like your main thing, and you've done it for many years, and maybe we can explore that in a few minutes. But what was it about being a YouTuber and educator? Was it because you wanted to be an educator, or was it because you saw that the internet was just starting to get popular and YouTube was starting to get popular as well? Is that the reason why you decided to start Produce Like a Pro in the first place? Or what was the reasoning behind it?
Well, first of all, I didn't think there was any way to make any money from it. And I knew a couple of people that were doing it, and it seemed like it was just a case of like, the ad revenue might be $1,000, but you'll spend $4,000 making the videos. Yeah. So I didn't really think at that point. So like I was saying, I didn't even bother running ads because I wanted people to watch the videos, and I didn't want them to be put off by watching ads. Now, of course, with the amount of music and features we do with other artists, we can't control ads. So it is what it is. Yeah. So, and, like I said, I don't care. Money goes to the artist. That's all that matters. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I just thought, well, look, I come from this poor background, and I've created all of this without going to music school, without interning in studios, and without doing all of the things that you're told you have to do. And now here it is, like 2014, 2015, 6-7 years ago. And I'm looking around going, well, those things don't exist anymore. And if you can't go to a studio and become an intern, then assist, and then become a famous producer, because there's now, even in 2014, 15, there was like already a quarter of the studios that there are, then, most of the classic studios are gone. So I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna do what I can, and I was just gonna show people and be like, hey, I've got all this nice gear, but I didn't used to, and this is how I did it. So it was more of a case of like, this is how to get there, because I also felt like, looking at YouTube, even then there was a lot of people that were like professional YouTubers, they were like, how can I make some money? I think I'm going to teach recording, and it was a little bit cringy. I'd watch it and be like, ugh. And there's even more now, of course, because it's an opportunity, to run businesses, and I get it. And so I just felt like, this is going to be good. This is going to be somebody that actually does make money in music, showing how it can be done. So it just seemed like a unique, thing. Now, lots of other people have got in and done it that also have great credits as well, but they don't tend to stick it out because it's tough. You really do have to be obsessional about it. And luckily I am completely obsessive about everything I do.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's so amazing. Thanks, man. Tell us as well, talking about, studios that you've like walked into, as well as obviously you've famously interviewed some amazing guests like over the years on Produce Like a Pro. So what have been some of your, I know it's probably asking if like to choose a favorite child, but what have like been your favorite like guests or your favorite studios that you've walked into and just been like, what the hell, where am I? This is absolutely incredible. Tell us some of the places that you've walked into that you've loved.
There's some really cool ones. I mean, there's some things that I don't know, and so ones that surprised me I didn't know anything about was Scott Frankfurt. Does anybody know him? Look him up on YouTube.
Yeah,
so he's like making records with jazz players and Latino artists. He does a lot of like Latin jazz kind of music, and he wrote to me and said, hey, I have a studio. It's like in the valley, like 5 miles away from you. If you ever want to come by, check it out, So I went online, I saw a few photos, and it looked pretty cool. So I show up there, and he's taken his house and converted it into this beautiful studio. And he had just done like a big band day, and his front room was like all mic'd up where all the horns were. And he had his piano, like a Stein, I think it was a Steinway, opened up, mic'd up, ready to go. And I was just like, this guy's badass. This is like, amazing. When I grow up, I want to be him, and a sweet guy. And then it turns out like, he was one of the, what are they called? Is it Spectrasonics? He's one of the guys behind like some of the best samples in the world. And so he was an engineer, producer, musician, great keyboard player, all of these things. And he had come along and just basically he had recorded like some of those really famous piano sounds. I can't remember which piano it was now, but it's a piano in LAFX that most of us know and use in our productions. He was the guy that recorded it. So he's like this meticulous kind of like guy with these incredible cool credits in a studio that he built entirely in his house. So and just like really good. Check out the video. It's like so well thought out, so laid out. His wife came back. I think she was off doing something. She came back, and you could just tell they were like completely, in simpatico, as they would say. She was like, you could tell that he was like his best friend and his business partner, and they knew him. And I walked away from that experience going, wow, when I grew up, I want to be Scott Frankfurt. And he's not famous, but if you check out his credits, they're pretty amazing because they're working with like incredibly well-known Latin and jazz musicians, and it's some of the best sounding. Who's the guy? T.O. Super famous, and the fact that I can't remember his name is ridiculous.
You can Google it.
Is it T.O. Macero? Is that his name for people watching? I think he did stuff with him. Yeah. I mean, basically, he worked with some of the best of the best.
Yeah,
just working with like, you're like, what? You work with that guy? And he's like, oh yeah, we did three albums together. And I'm like, I've never heard of you. I mean, yeah.
Crazy.
So that was a good one, because obviously, you know, Blackbird is incredible, you know, going to Sunset Sound is amazing. You know, going to the famous studios is always great, because you get like this, oh my God, and you walk in and you get told a story about how Jim Morrison was over there and Robbie Krieger was here, and then there was Eddie Van Halen put his amp in there, and this is the chamber we used, and all of that's incredible. And my little kid self like gets so excited when I go to those classic studios. But going to guys like that, who've got it dialed in, who know what they're doing, who are really passionate, who are good people as well, like good human beings. That takes your breath away, and you're just like, those are the people we need to be championing more. You know.
Completely agree. That's so absolutely love that, because I see as well, like on your channel as well, you know, you've got some up and coming engineers as well. So it's not necessarily just people that are famous as well, but it's like engineers that are just like starting off from scratch as well. You know, it's great that you champion those people as well. You know, it's wonderful to see. It's
really super important. I mean, it's really, really important because, look, I'm not stupid. I've been doing this for 7 years. I know that I could like double the numbers on the channel by falling into all of the things. People say to me all the time, you know, why don't you just do videos where you're like, you know, where the thumbnail's like, you know, this
with the text,
you know, auto tune, gritting drums, you know, it's going to get huge views.
Completely.
But it's divisive, and it's specifically designed to build up and reinforce the expertness of the person creating it. And that is fine. There's already hundreds and hundreds of people trash talking plugins and hardware and people and music and stuff. I'm not interested in the rants. It doesn't serve any purpose except to reinforce the person who's doing it as being some kind of expert. You know, it's just not who I am. I think the other thing is, like I said, I've been in the music industry since I was a kid, and I've got to pay respect to these engineers and producers and these musicians and these songwriters, and sort of, I don't want to sort of like complain about an industry that really has helped so many people by fulfilling and saying divisive stuff that's built around stereotypes, largely which are untrue. And so for me, it's really, really important to do the right thing. And if it's the only thing anybody remembers here, it's the most important thing is do the right thing. And the right thing is to showcase great talent of any age, great rooms of any age, great gear of any price. That is far more important to me than going, here's the reason why Led Zeppelin were the greatest band in the world. 1 million views. I mean, we know it would work. Let's do something. Let's do Led Zeppelin, the greatest band in the world.
Absolutely, man.
You and I can make the video, we'll put it up on the channel. It will get 1 million views.
Yeah, completely.
But it's like, we all know Led Zeppelin are absolutely amazing, but I'd much, much, much rather have Scott Frankfurt on the channel. It's 5 years ago now. His video's got 52,000 views. I love that. 52,000 views of somebody I'd never even heard of before he sent me an email. And he's just one example. I mean, obviously we recently went, oh my God, he's got a video here. He did, see, this is how badass he is, where he does a video with a girl singer and the members of Earth, Wind and Fire are in the band. And yet he's not a household name. Sergio Mendes, that's it. He's got videos with Sergio Mendes and John Legend. I mean,
that's amazing.
Check him out. He's a badass. Get him on your show. Get him on your show.
Man, definitely.
Sergio Mendes, ask him about your recording Sergio Mendes and John Legend and Common. You know, he's just a badass, and he's the sweetest guy. And but his YouTube channel's got 6,520 subscribers, and yet he's probably more qualified than 99% of the people that are, imparting quote unquote advice. It's a tough one. It really is. This space is definitely a consistent thing. Where you're balancing out. Do you do a video with like the top 10 reasons why you suck? I mean, there's literally videos why you suck at mixing.
It's bonkers. No, it's not good, is it? You're absolutely right, Warren. It's just
got to do the right thing.
Absolutely. And what I love about, your channel and your community is the fact of positivity as well. And it's something, as we're just a Diddy community, we're very fortunate. We've almost grown to 3,000 members in the past few months. Well, almost a year now. But again, it's just like kind of we're keeping things positive, and we don't like, very similar to you guys, don't really see many arguments on there. And it's not really kind of going, oh, well, this EQ was better than this EQ and all that sort of stuff. Because what I've talked to quite a few engineers about this, I don't know if you agree or not, but it's all about perception. Because there's, however many billion people there are on this planet, we've all got a different pair of ears to one another, and we all perceive music in a different way.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to ask you though as well. Yes, I know that you champion the smaller guys and girls, but as well working with Joe Perry. What was it like working with Joe Perry?
It's pretty amazing. I got a real soft spot for Joe. Coming away from that album that I did with well, I've done, obviously I did solo stuff with. It's a lot of answer. This could be another hour if you really want it. So Joe was my favorite guy in the band to work with. Tom Hamilton is an absolute sweetheart. I'll get back to Joe in a minute, just because I don't want to, because Joe will be gone for an hour. I mean, Tom's father, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, because I don't know if it's something he's ever made public, but Tom's father was this badass pilot in the Second World War.
No way.
And he flew a P-40, and he flew it in Asia. So he flew it in Japan. So he's one of like these serious, hardcore, badass kind of pilots. So we bonded over aviation, which, if you know anything about me, the studio is called Spitfire. You know, I'm obsessed with aviation. I've taken lessons, but I've never actually got my license, only because I've never had the time to string together enough lessons to do it. You can't take a lesson once, another one in 2 months, and then not one for a year, so but anyway, so I'm obsessed with aviation. So we bonded over that, Tom and I. And then one day I said to him, well, I take my son every Sunday to different museums around California. And one of the places we love to go is called Planes of Fame in Chino. And I said to him, they have 85 Second World War planes that fly. And he's like, eyes lit up. And he's like, what time are you going to go there? I said, I'll meet you there at 12 o'clock on Sunday. And he drove. And it's like an hour and a half's drive from where he's staying. And he met me there, and Tom and me and my son walked around the museum. Only one kid recognized him and wouldn't leave us alone, but it is what it is. No, he was a nice kid. But otherwise, it was just a beautiful, beautiful day. So big fan of Tom, great guy. Now, to get back to Joe. Joe is like, I'm just going to be honest. When I went into the record, their previous management, a couple of people on the team had said to me, you're going to find that Brad is going to be a really good guy for you. And I was like, what do you mean? They said, well, Brad's, he's a very accomplished guitar player, which he is. Brad is incredible. Yeah. And he said, Brad will be the guy that you can lean on to do like, the rhythm parts, like maybe some riffs, like hold it down, rakes. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what they said, but they basically played up Brad as being kind of the utility guy, which is fine. And so they sort of painted this picture like it was going to be a lot of Brad, and then, Joe was going to do some frilly stuff and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So we came to do the record, and we tracked all of the basics live. And then when we moved to LA to my studio, because I used to own this big studio where we tracked at, we moved to LA to do that. We were there for like 6 months. It was the exact opposite. Joe was in there like every single day for like 6 months. And he would come in. He'd come in like late morning, early afternoon. Stephen was an early person because Stephen at the time was doing American Idol. So Stephen would come in at like 10 or 11 in the morning and then work till like 1 and then jump in his car and go off to film American Idol, which was just a couple of miles away. And Joe would show up like near the end of Stephen working and then work till like 7 or 8 at night. And then Stephen would come back and work really super late, sometimes till 1 o'clock in the morning. Those guys were workaholics. Those two in particular, it was all about it. They worked their ass off on it. Now, don't get me wrong, the other guys worked hard as well, but they were in there doing all the overdubs, backgrounds, lead vocals, everything, Anyway, so all of that was sort of happening. And I just started to really like Joe a lot because, well, first of all, so when we were first in Boston, I was in Pandora's Box, their studio, which is in like this industrial estate, and they converted it into a big studio, and they have like a whole like separate like warehouse that's got like more guitars and amps you could ever imagine. But in this main studio, they have this Frankenstein console they built, which has Neve, API, and also Focusrite mic pre's in it. So it's like this weird Frankenstein of all these different flavors. Plus, we've recorded everything to 40 channels of 2-inch tape. So we had a 16-inch, 2-inch, and a 24 synced up together. So we're tracking all the basics on tape. And that's what something Jack Douglas wanted to do. He's like, I want this to go onto tape. I want a record where we punch in and fix rather than manipulate and chop around. Yeah. So that's how we did all of the basics. And we did come back to LA with like 11 or 12 like songs that were tracked, and largely live, rhythm guitar parts, bass and drums, all tracked live. Wow. And we did eventually put into Pro Tools because we ended up using, what's it called? I don't know if he makes it anymore, but the Clasp system. So it came off the repro head back into Pro Tools. And that was interesting and useful. So when we got back, we had the 24 track that I have over there, which I want to pick up the things that will probably unplug. But anyway, there's a 24 track 2-inch over there. Yeah, Connor, you want to pick it up and move it over here? Probably only weighs about half a ton. Connor's just going to pick it up, hang it in the shot here. So we did that. We had the Clasp system running on that. We would do all the overdubs. So we'd go onto tape and then back into Pro Tools. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, so the first time I ever worked with Joe, he was like, turn me up. Like he came into the control room to listen, and he said, turn me up. So I turned him up, and he's like, more. And I realized he was like sitting on my left, and because of the position of where he was sitting live, I had him panned over to the right, and he was like, I was like, sorry, it's over here on the right. And he just kind of gave me that look of like, what's your point? You know what I mean? I want to hear myself. So I was like, okay, I get the dynamic here. So I panned the guitar over to where he was sitting so he could hear it. But it was kind of cool because he wasn't saying much, but he was just like, I'm the boss here. And I'm like, that's great. Everybody in the band's my boss. We're the production staff. They're the bosses. So that was cool. But anyway, but it was like, it was definitely very like work ethic, English engineer guy getting the sounds, American band, all this kind of stuff. So he sits next to me and we're listening back to some guitar parts, and we're a few days in and we've said nice polite hellos and, hey, do you need this, a little extra compression, whatever, some basic stuff. Yeah. And I don't know how it came up. He was talking about a guitar sound he wanted, and he goes, oh yeah, the sound I want is like, it's my old Guild Starfire. And I was like, Guild Starfire? And I was like, my first really good guitar that I bought, one, after my father and I made one, the one I actually bought was a Guild Starfire 2, a 1962. And his eyes lit up and he goes, that was my first guitar. And then suddenly we were like, that was it. Everything that had gone on before, the whole formal engineer musician relationship. Now it was like, oh, you're a guitar player. Great. And the thing is with Joe, I've worked with Joe and Eddie and Ace, and they're all obviously different personalities and different people and play differently and all that kind of stuff. But they're all in many ways the same person. They all love cars. They all have fast cars. They're all obsessed with music. Would you mind fielding this, Louise? Just tell a call back. They're all obsessed with music. They're all obsessed with guitars. They're all obsessed with amplifiers, pedals, you name it, everything. Yeah. Well, Eddie, not so much on pedals. He was more of a plug it into an amp guy. But the point is like, it was all about music and guitars. And once you clicked into that in an honest way, not in a kind of like, so what guitar do you use? But an actual like where they can like feel the energy. That was it. Yeah. Suddenly it was just like talking about guitar sounds and tones. And we had this one song, and I'm blanking on what it was called. I have to go back and listen to the album. And Joe wanted like an absolutely massive guitar sound. Like, not like layered with 50 amps guitar, but just like one guitar that was so huge. So I said to him, I was like, what about that Jeff Beck sound off of Truth? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, the dun, 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 dun. you know, they ain't superstitious. I was like, that's so massive and fat. And he's like, yeah, that's the sound I want. And, you know, so I said to him, you know, do you want me to get that sound? And he's like, let's do it. he said, you know, so he said that the, what's going on in the chat?
We'll sort them out one sec.
Is there a fight going on in the chat?
I think we can see stuff. Oh, we're live. Hold on.
I don't. This isn't my chat, so I can't send an email because it wasn't my thing. He's upset. Right. He didn't get an email about it. And even if we had sent an email, it would have been at the wrong time because there was a changeover. You know.
Sort of done.
So what was I saying?
Talking about guitar sounds, Jeff.
Oh yeah. So I said to him, I said, oh, it's a Marshall stack inside of a cupboard.
Yeah.
And so what Jeff Beck did is he turned up the Marshall stack to maximum, so it was just so loud, and then closed the door and mic'd the door. It was like it was mic'd, and then what happened is you had, you know, this massive guitar sound because it was just a. And what was so cool is we came to mix it, and Neil Avron was mixing the record with me. So I was still engineering the record, and Neil Avron was trying to finish it up. You know, so sorry, I was trying to finish it up, and Neil Avron started mixing. And then when I finished engineering, I picked up the rest of the mixes and finished the record up here. Well, I was still engineering up here, but I mixed it up here. But what was so fun about it is, like, we would drive at like 10 o'clock at night and go and listen to Neil's mixes, and then go back to work sometimes because we were sort of really behind in schedule. So we go up there one night, and Neil's like, he's like, I had to skinny this guitar sound down. And we're like, I was like, you know, kind of chuckling. He's like, it's so massive. It's like the whole track. It was just like this guitar sound was like, it was just absolutely massive.
Love it.
It was like so much low end, so much low mid, so much mid range. It was just exploding out of it. It was awesome.
That's so cool.
Just so much fun because the thing with Joe is he didn't ever want the same guitar sound. You know, he just would like continually, you know, we would spend like a day getting the sound for a bridge, and it would be so cool. I remember we had this one where I had a Marshall stack in the live room, and the live room was huge. So I mic'd up that, and I mic'd up the rooms. Then I had a small little amp in a booth off to the side, and that was mic'd. Plus I had a DI going through a fuzz box into a Neve pre or BAE pre, driven really hard to get that Jimmy Page kind of, you know, ripped up kind of square wave guitar sound. And then I blended all three back together with all the room mics and got this one guitar sound for a bridge. It took the whole day to get it exactly the way we wanted. And then he's like, oh, great. Did the part, which was like 4 bars. And he's like, cool. Now let's. And I was what? Can't we just spent like 7 hours getting this amazing guitar sound? There must be something else we can use it on. He's like, nah, let's just do something different. So the thing about Joe is, like, he's still that big kid. He's still got the wonder. He still wants to. He's in a rock band. He still wants to do it. He still wants to, you know, push the boundaries and have some fun and do all the things that we wanted to do as a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that. Thanks so much for that, Warren. That's absolutely brilliant. It's great to hear as well. And as a producer as well, whether you're working with someone that's up and coming or working with someone that's, you know, as famous as Joe, how do you inspire artists when they're kind of there going, oh, I'm not really in the mood today, or, you know, help me out here, I'm really stuck on this song? How do you help motivate an artist as a producer?
I think different people have different ways. I mean, obviously I love playing examples of music that will get them excited. You know, here's some simple things that you can do. If you're working with a cool indie band, for instance, and they're a little worried about actually having a hooky melody, because that's what's happening a lot these days. I think for a lot of cooler bands and stuff, they're worried to write pop songs. They don't have an inability to do it. They just want to maintain their credibility. And sometimes having a song which people can sing along with is like, oh, that's a little bit too, oh, that's too poppy or something like that. So I just do obvious things like play them The Cure. I'm just like, this is some Cure songs, and show them, what can be done. Like, look, is there a more cooler and credible band than The Cure? Even playing Joy Division, Love Will Tear Us Apart. I mean, there's so many bands that were able to maintain their credibility and their artistry, and also pop songs. And I think that that's one way, when you've got that difficulty, because it can be difficult, because bands are very, very afraid to keep, they want to keep their credibility. I mean, we always used to joke when I first started working in music that every singer wants to be Bob Dylan 1965. They want to look like him, dress like him. And I get it. John Lennon bought the Bob Dylan cap. I mean, even John Lennon wanted to be Bob Dylan. So I get it. We all want that credibility. However, there's only really room for one Bob Dylan. You've still, and Bob Dylan is amazing and life-changing and one of the most important songwriters of all time. But he also wrote "It Ain't Me, Babe." It ain't me, babe. No, it ain't me, babe. It ain't me you're looking for, babe. He also wrote, Just Like a Woman, which is one of the most beautiful songs of all time. It's not just always about being cool,
Yeah, completely.
You know what I mean? So it's a fun time. It's a fun time. But yeah, great questions. I love talking about this.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Warren. As well, kind of been a mix engineer as well. So obviously, you've seen over the years. Did you start mixing? Were you on like ADATs as well? Or is that how you started off?
I did start on ADATs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did start on ADATs. Well, I mean, I didn't start on ADATs, but ADATs was actually the first kind of thing that sounded professional. That's what I meant. So obviously I started like, all poor kids. I started with my dad's 60s Philips cassette player and his Sony like 70s stereo. And so what I would do is I would play the guitar, and I actually would play the guitar through the stereo. It was really stupid. And then record it onto the cassette player through the microphone, and then take that and press play and play it while overdubbing and play back. It was really haphazard. I ended up getting this amp made by this company called Futuristic Aids Limited, FAL.
Wow.
And as if you know what foul means in English, like crap, smells terrible. And it was a pretty awful, and it was a bass amp. And I couldn't afford a distortion for the longest time. So for the first 6 months, I just played clean through a bass amp.
Yeah.
It was volume, bass, and treble. And then I saved up enough money to buy a used Colesborough Suzz pedal, SUZZ, which now turns out to be, of course, worth a fortune, because it's like, it's rare and vintage. Yeah. But it was dreadful sounding, and that was my fuzz. All my friends had nice amps with Boss DS1s or OD1s, which were great sounding distortion and overdrive pedals. And I had the Colesborough Suzz. But I would record that. I'd never actually owned a 4-track. I didn't have enough money to buy one, but I borrowed a friend's 4-track for a while and did some overdubbing stuff. I remember getting quite frustrated, early on, because I had a bigger sound in my head than I could actually achieve, and at the time it might put some people off, but in a way it just made me want to achieve more and get more stuff going. You know what I mean? So that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it. Growing up and doing music like that. But then the ADAT was the first like real. It was a huge leap. I mean, it wasn't cheap, completely. But it wasn't unbelievably expensive. So I remember going to a friend's studio. I can't remember what year, like 91 or 92, like a home studio. And I still had cassettes, and I walked in and they had this like ADAT, that black-faced ADAT, and like maybe a Mackie console, maybe that's when it first came out. And it was amazing. It was just such a huge leap forward. It was just unbelievable. I just remember thinking, this sounds like what I'm recording. Where with the 4-track cassette, you know, you would get a great guitar sound and it would come back sounding like little thin and weedy because, you know, you had that much tape to put your big fat guitar sound down on. With an ADAT, it came back sounding pretty darn close. You know, it was, yeah. So you could do fun things like throw out room mics and print them with the room mics and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it was, ADATs were huge. And I know that people hate them, but it was great. Facebook user says, how was the sound experience with the ADAT, Warren Huart? I thought of getting one. I mean, to be honest, I mean, if it's you can get one at entry level, $100 or $200, do it. If that's all you've got to spend, do it. Because the most important thing is to get making music, you know, and that's another thing, you know, going back to this whole idea of like, you know, trying to get away from this kind of finger, you know, the ringing and the wagging of the fingers and, you know, all of that kind of negativity that happens in most kind of forums and stuff like that. You know, with getting away from that is like trying to remind people and empower them that it doesn't matter what you got. As much as I'm joking about the 4-track cassette was like frustrating compared with the ADATs, which was a huge thing. It still was so glad I had 4-track cassettes, albeit it was borrowed because I couldn't afford one. But it still was like a wonderful experience to be able to hear music back that I was creating with overdubs. It was like, woo!
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, when did you first then start on a DAW? What I'm guessing, was it Pro Tools? Was it Pro Tools that you started on, or?
Pro Tools was the first DAW that I could edit audio on, but I did work with other people that had all of the original Steinberg stuff. So, you know, when I was a kid, I had like my girlfriend when I was like 16. Her brother was about 4 or 5 years older than me, and I would go over to their house, the family's house, and he had like SH-101s that he'd bought in like the early 80s. So like SH-101s. And he had like sequencers and all kinds of fun stuff. And he would create music like that. And it was like mind blowing to me, like to hear like and like all this stuff. And he was recording, he wasn't recording audio like that. He was recording audio to a 4-track, but he was sequencing all of the stuff using, I can't remember which Steinberg. It was probably Notator, or it could have been one of the earliest versions of Cubase, but it's pre-audio editing. And so I was using other systems, but they were purely and simply for sequencing stuff. And I didn't own that. I just got to play with it and all of that kind of good stuff.
Oh, so cool. Yeah, as I've got chatting fairly recently with Justin, who's on the Steinberg website, and Justin Perkins, amazing mastering engineer, but also Timo Steinberg as well. So I'm a Nuendo user, and I love Nuendo, and also Wavelab as well. It's so cool. With that in mind as well, and I know it's like I was chatting away with your engineer about this earlier on as well, but what is your thoughts on Dolby Atmos? I know you've probably been asked this a few times now, I'd imagine, but I know that you've walked into a couple of amazing Dolby Atmos rooms. Do you think that it's really going to impact music as much as Apple makes out it's going to be? Or do you think that it's mainly for film? Or do you think it's going to start taking off anytime soon? What are your thoughts, Warren?
I mean, I had this conversation in the Academy last week. I mean, it already has. The problem with the... Okay, so first of all, I have one text with one person at Dolby last week. I've never spoken to them about anything. I'm trying to get hold of one of the engineers who did a mix in Atmos, and I don't know how to get hold of him. So I was given somebody at Atmos, like, can you tell me who mixed this song, because I'd like to interview them because it sounds amazing. And that's the only time I've ever been in contact with them. There was a message board recently I went on, and somebody said, a little bird told me that these videos are paid for by Dolby, which is absolute crap. You know, everybody's conspiracy theorists about stuff. So no, they haven't paid any money. I also don't actually have a Dolby Atmos room myself. But so here's the thing I want to seriously clear up. It's not about selling Dolby Atmos to regular people. Yeah, it's not. I don't think I'm ever going to have the money to build a Dolby Atmos room in my house with PMC speakers for $70,000. It's never going to happen. My wife is never going to okay us to do that. Yeah. So it's not about it. What it is Dolby Atmos is the environment that us as engineers and producers and mixers work in, because if you can mix something in that, everything is then folded down to spatial. It's folded down to Amazon's version. It's used in film and TV. Bear in mind, Netflix insists every single piece of music now given to them is mixed for full surround and Atmos. So if you are serious about being a professional mixer, sooner rather than later, you're going to have to overcome that, or you're just going to have to find somebody you just print everything down, all the stems, and then go and send it to a friend of yours who can remix it in Atmos. The point is, it's not about selling Atmos. It's immersive audio is here to stay. Immersive audio is not going anywhere, whether it be like binaural or whatever it is. Kids are already playing games in virtual reality where they are looking, and here's the sound source, and they're moving their head, and the sound source is staying there, and it's already there. They've already got music playing behind them. So if there's a pair of speakers in the game, it's playing music, it's already there. Immersive is here to stay. If you want to stay in stereo only, fantastic. But figure out how, if you're trying to get stuff into labels, into film, into, for label stuff, releases, film, TV, and all that stuff, you've got to be serious about it. So my only reason why I talk about it is I'm trying to help people. I have absolutely nothing to gain. None of those videos I'm getting paid for. Dolby sure as heck aren't paying for me. And I'm just going to people. I'm just trying to help educate. But it's interesting because all of the conversation below is like, I don't see the consumer buying Dolby Atmos. Are we saying that they have to buy Dolby Atmos? What we're saying is like, this is how professionals are working so that they can give a final product. They can deliver. The deliverables are in a format that can be created to any specific, medium, that is going to be used. And that's what you want to do. It's fine. It's fine if you don't want to do it. I'm not trying to force people to spend, Cali do a system for like 5,000 or 6,000. But, I know most people spend more than that on a pair of speakers. But, it's really just that. Look, here you go. Mary and Sam. I attended a conference from Adobe, and they said the major things coming for gaming and content creation. Atmos will definitely be a part of that for sure. I'm currently learning game coding. Yeah, all gaming. It's all going to be done in surround. It's all going to be done in immersive audio. You don't have to get into it, but, and you can mix and listen back in binaural and headphones. It's the point is it's not going anywhere. So it's fine. People... It's not the same as 5.1. It's not the same as quadraphonic. I know that's what everybody wants to say. It's not, because it's a format that's being used, to get reused in different situations for different mediums. It's so, I wish Dolby would pay me. I'm probably helping them quite a lot, but I don't really, I don't really care so much. No disrespect to Dolby. I'm not really care about helping Dolby. I care about helping our community.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the most important thing.
With that in mind as well, so I was part of, still in your community as well. It's so fantastic. And I love your Feedback Fridays as well that you do as well with up and coming engineers and supporting those guys and girls.
You were an Academy member.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great. It was amazing. I know I was talking to you very briefly about this before we went live, and it was awesome that so I'm a mastering engineer, amateur, kind of going into like intermediate level almost. But I was very lucky to work with an artist, and we got into the UK top 10. We both went, how the heck did that happen in the country chart in the UK? iTunes. And thanks, man. That's so nice of you, Warren. And sent it across to Eric, and you said, we'll play it on Feedback Friday. And I tell you what, I was so nervous, and I'm sure you get many engineers, on the Academy as well, so nervous for other engineers to hear it. But it's wonderful what you do, and the fact that engineers get to listen to what each other are doing as well is just absolutely brilliant. What inspired Feedback Friday? Did you suddenly just pop up with the idea and think, what, we're going to give our community a chance to, listen to their music? Because not a lot of communities do that, and it's cool that you take the time out to do that for your people. Thank you.
And it's interesting because I do know other people that do versions of it, and I watch some of them, and the thing I found that was difficult is it's very hard sometimes from technical minded people like mixers and stuff who are super, super talented to separate themselves enough to view music. One of the blessings I've had is I've done every job. So I started off as a guitar player, and obviously I was a guitar player and a songwriter in a band, and then I learned other instruments. I had actually, up until I moved to America, my greatest success was actually playing bass in a band. I'd had top 40 singles as a bass player.
Brilliant.
And when I was talking about playing Reading Rock Festival and stuff like that, and Roskilde and all these big festivals, I was playing bass on stage. On some of the recordings, I was playing guitar and bass, but live I would play bass. So I've sort of been in all those situations. I was always the grown-up in the band, so it meant that I drove the van. I could book the hotel, I could book the show, I could do this. In many situations, I was the sort of one handling that kind of stuff. So, but it also meant that I did session guitar playing when I moved to LA, as well as I was in a signed band. We made records, and then I was doing session guitar playing. I toured. I played with a few, famous, semi-famous musicians and singers and songwriters, and did all that kind of stuff. And I made a living at it all the time, having a studio in my apartment, in my flat in Silver Lake. So I was doing all of that stuff simultaneously, at once. But then, I did some productions that got signed. And I saw the American business model was very different, because the demos I did with my band in England, we got signed by, and then they got put out. So our demos were actually released as singles. I came to America, I would work with bands and I demo them. And instead of them putting it out and it being fresh and it being being raw, they just gave them to the same 5 or 6 men who basically just copied the productions exactly and made them very clinical and removed all of the soul and all of what's special. And I could see the writing on the wall. I was like, this isn't really going to work. Music can't really evolve. And you look at, going back to your point, you go back to, Jack Endino was making those records in Seattle. And he was not like a household name. He was not, I'm not going to knock, but he wasn't one of those kind of 5 or 6 LA kind of super producer mixer guys. He was completely left of center. He was roll up his sleeves, get your hands dirty. And that's why those records have a specialness to them. That's probably why to this day we still all like Steve Albini, because Steve's got that same kind of not pretentious kind of roll up your sleeves, stick a mic in front of it, get a good performance. And that is why, one of the reasons, to answer your point, why that music sounds so fresh, and especially at the time, is it just had that rawness to it, capturing performances, capturing great songs. So when I came to America, and I had 4 or 5 artists, bands, etc., I got signed. But in doing that, in developing a band that got signed to Epic, one of the guys that I was working with on the project got a gig as an A&R guy at Epic. And before you know it, I got consultancy work. And then I started being a consultant A&R for labels. And one of the things it would teach me going into label meetings is completely different to what we are taught. So one of the beauties about doing Feedback Friday, so it took me 5 minutes to get to the point, but one of the beauties about that is I don't listen to music like a mixer. I can find where there's something wrong. We can talk about frequencies to boost or cut, and all this kind of stuff. We can do all of those things. We can do them, and we will. And we talk about fixing problems and all that kind of stuff. However, we talk on much more global terms, because to be a great producer, engineer, or mixer, sometimes it is the kind of Al Schmidt, Steve Jenowick kind of way of putting up microphones and capturing amazing performances. Sometimes it is that. Other times it's having the ability to enhance maybe, this band's got a little bit of Joy Division or New Order in them. Let's kind of push them down that road and see if they can experiment a bit more and bring in some, rather than just capturing the performances. Because it's great when you're working with world-class musicians, but when you've got a young band or a young artist, you want to kind of encourage them and grow their creativity. So that's a whole different way of listening to it. So when we're listening to your mix or other people's mixes and mastering inside of the Academy, we're taking all of that into account. We're not just talking about it, which is for most of these models that I've seen about you see there's a build up at 250 hertz. It's that stuff is fine, but sometimes it completely loses the point. I sat in many label meetings and listened to singles by bands. I won't say who they are, but big bands. And they were chosen, rejected, or whatever. Not one person has said, oh, yeah, we can't put it out as a single. There's too much 250 in it. Never happened.
No.
You know, and you know, when a vocal came in and it was like ripped to shreds, distorted and crazy, if it called for it in the track and it was a little bit wrong and weird, everybody would be like, whoa, that's cool. What's that? You know, but I've sat in on some of these things like, well, I feel like you did some clipping there at 7K on bar 40. It's like, no, it got exciting there, you know?
Completely.
It's interesting. I was with Steve Jenowick last week with an Atmos recording, which we're gonna talk about soon. I'll let you know when it gets closer.
Brilliant.
And he and Al remixed Kinda Blue, the greatest or most famous, you could argue it, but most famous jazz recording of all time. So they remixed it in Atmos.
Yeah.
And they had only, was it 3 tracks? Oh, you were, no, it was Eric. I think they had 3 tracks to work with. Okay. It may have been 4, but I feel like it was 3. And I said to Steve, I was like, I didn't know until I was in a PMC ultra expensive room listening to Kinda Blue that one of the horns on the right-hand speaker, it sounds like it's overloading a ribbon mic. Because I heard this, and I was like, I never knew that. I never, and
oh man, that's so
cool.
And
it's like, but the point is, it's like, I said to him, did you fix it? And he was like, no. He goes, we went back to the original recordings every single time. And if there was, he said, if there was something wrong in our tapes, we would check the original pressing. What they did is they found, like, they went through hundreds of stores or whatever and found the earliest not test pressing, but the original pressing they could find of the album. And they had it there on a turntable at all times. So if they heard something and they weren't sure if it was a degradation on the tape or something, they go to the album, they put on the album, they listen back through the speakers and go, no, it's in the original, and keep moving on. And he said they basically did 0 EQ or compression to it. They just panned it around. And what they ended up doing was taking, I'm sorry, Steve, if I'm telling your story, taking the original recording, putting it in one of Capitol's rooms, setting it up like a band, and then mic'd up the room and then brought the room back in. So now when you listen to an Atmos, you are sitting, listening to Miles Davis in one of the rooms at Capitol. And it's pretty amazing experience. It's beautiful. You're just there going, wow, this is absolutely amazing. So, my point is like, you know, one of the skill sets I think we have, and it's very important, is not overanalyzing something with an inch of its life, but finding what's good in the recordings and enhancing it. Like I remember early on, we had a lot of ultra beginners. I mean, there's some people on the calls here that came in as total beginners that now are really talented mixers, but they came in as total beginners and they would do something and it would be very roomy. But I would listen to it, and at the end, I'd go, I like this. I like where you're going because it reminds me of a band playing in a club. But why don't you go the whole hog? And then I would, I would give them some encouragement and some ideas. And then they would learn a skill like, oh, the mix I did, it sounds like in a live club. Okay. And then other people would come in and do like, like really, really bone dry mixes and stuff like that. And people would say, oh, I put more reverb on the snare. And it might mean reverb on the snare, but then I might go, you know what? I like this. This is very late 70s new wave where disco was still super influential. If you listen to New Order, and Joy Division, they wanted like a super almost dry disco sound, but they also wanted Kraftwerk, which is obviously very dry electronic, mixed with like bands like Neu from Germany, all of the, what we call krautrock, all of that stuff. They wanted all of that mixed together, but they also had a sensibility of Iggy and the Stooges and the Velvet Underground. This is bigger than, there's too much 250 hertz. It's like, so that's the bit that's missing. And that's why it's called produce like a pro, not mix like a mix.
Completely.
We've moved away from this idea. I think mixing is difficult to do well, but I also think it's easy to teach. Taste is something that requires time and requires cultivation. And it's far more important to me to like bring, you know, empower people to make creative decisions than it is to sort of literally like build a road map, you know, of like, you know, yeah, this is like 60 hertz, and then you put the, you can do all of that stuff. Yeah, you like my expert, Anita likes my expert voice.
Oh, no, it's amazing. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, thinking about that as well. So I know that when you interviewed Graham Coxon, when you guys pulled apart song 2, and I think was there some bleed from Damon Albarn's voice as well? So Mike bleed, sorry,
it was
from that recording. Yeah,
it was scratch vocals, and he was scratch vocals, and he was just making it up as he went. You know, I'm gonna like, yeah, you know, and it was all like, I feel heavy metal. You know, and what's funny is like, you know, you're English, so you understood the sense of humor between Graham and I. You know, I'm sitting here and Graham's there.
100%. Yeah,
and I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. And you know, it's two Englishmen talking to each other. You know what that means? That's just like, that was a whole sentence. My going, what? And him going, yeah. It's basically me going, what the heck did that mean? What was he doing? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I know. It's completely. But then I had all these people going, why is he saying what? It's obvious what he's saying. It's like, no.
I don't get it. Yeah, completely.
You don't get that the sort of English kind of, it's probably not even, you know, UK kind of way of communicating with each other. We just go, what? You know,
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, that's the scratch vocal from In the Room. So so what's happening is like Stephen had them all in the studio. They're all plugged in. They're all playing. Oh, it wasn't. Was it Stephen? I thought it was Stephen, wasn't it? Oh my god. So can you check? Make sure who produced song 2? Blur. I thought it was Stephen. But anyway, the band were all set up in the control room, just like they would be in here. And Damon's either holding a 57 or a 58, just a handhold microphone, whatever was to hand, and he's just singing, and the speakers are bleeding into it while they're putting down all the basics.
That's mad. That's
simple
crazy.
as that. And then they came to, I think Graham said it, didn't he? He said that they came, you know, Damon then wrote proper lyrics, you know, and came to re-sing it with the proper lyrics, and realized that all the energy and everything had gone from the made up on the spot lyrics.
Yeah.
Even though Graham said that, I still had people debating me of like what the lyrics meant, and I can't believe, Warren, that you don't understand what he's trying to say. It was like he doesn't understand what he's trying to say.
I don't think even Damon really understood, did he? What he was saying. He just
and on pins and on needles.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Absolutely mad.
Somebody's like, well, that's referring to the original song from the 60s. I'm like, no, it's just me. It's just him making up words. But I mean, that's the spirit of rock and roll, isn't it? It's just like reckless abandon, you know. And it's such a great time. I love when that came out. And that guitar riff that they have. It is Stephen? Yeah, it is Stephen who did it. I don't know why I second guessed myself, because I know I spoke to Stephen about it, but he's one of my favorite producers. You know, you were asking earlier about people that I'm happy to interview. Now, obviously, Jack Douglas is an old friend, and he's made John Lennon and Aerosmith records and Cheap Trick, and worked with some of my favorite artists. And I spent months. We lived in the same apartment when we did the Aerosmith record for 3 months. So every day he was telling me stories. So I love all of that. But there's also the childhood kind of like, you know, the fact that Stephen did like Smiths and, you know, and this, you know, and of course the Cranberries and Blur, and just like all these great records. And then of course John Leckie, who did Radiohead, The Bends, which is a masterpiece, and Stone Roses' first records. It was just like to get to talk to those guys. Oh, it's like a dream come true. I grew up on those records. You know, I bought the Bends when it came out. It's a masterpiece.
I don't know if you've been, it's so cool. I don't know if you've been in contact with Steve Boffman. I've bumped into Steve B as well. But yeah, it's just like, I was chatting to him, and he told, you know, me stories about, you know, Michael Jackson walking into the room, and Prince, and, you know, been trained up by Dre and all that sort of stuff. And you know, he wasn't even a big hip hop guy, you know, but yet he fell into that world. But you're absolutely right. It's just hearing those stories. It's almost like another world, and it's magical. And I think, I don't know if you agree or not, Warren, but it's like, it's almost that those magical stories, they need to be kept alive to inspire people as well. And I think that, now it's like, I know that you were a vinyl guy, and me, a CD guy, my generation, walked in to a shop, and I would just try something out because the front cover looked cool of an album or a single or something like that. But did you miss
I was
those
the worst
days?
though. I was the worst though, because
really
because I was such a Luddite. I loved vinyl. I mean, CDs were out, but I just liked the whole experience. I'm not stupid, and actually some of the stuff has been proven. They for the longest time they were creating CDs off of the original vinyl pressing, and they didn't go back to the original master tapes. And you probably read all about that. I remember buying a Genesis record on CD in like mid 80s when CDs were really starting to take off in the UK, and putting it on and saying, this doesn't sound very good. Everybody's telling me it's supposed to have more low end and more extended dynamics and stuff, and it didn't sound good. And then a few years later, they went back and remastered it from the original tapes, and suddenly, whoa, low end. Everything was in there. And we did realize that we were being shafted in the 80s with CDs. They were just pushing it out because they could go back and resell everything again. Which is okay, again, the producers, the artists get to make money, people get to rediscover their favorite artists. I mean, it's a win-win, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely an interesting situation.
Oh, thanks so much for that, Warren. A couple of questions from our community for you that come through as well. So Adam Ridland, who's also an Academy member of yours as well, asks, he says, with the rate of music technology advances within modern music production, do you think there'll be a time when everyone will be working solely within the box, leaving outboard gear behind?
I mean, I suppose it comes down to how much of the tactile you still need, because it's really difficult, when you're playing a guitar, to sort of work in a world where everything's on a touch screen. But if I'm on my own and I've got a mic pre in front of me, I can just kind of do this. It's the mouse world, and I do think it's difficult because I don't know if there's, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see one control surface to rule them all. Do you? It's not like it's going to be difficult because there's so many DAWs. Now, if there was one control surface that just came out and like did everything, you know what I mean? Had the faders and the rotary controls, and you just bought that, then maybe. But I just think we're always going to have this thing where there's 12 different DAWs, probably even more, but 12 different like major DAWs all vying for attention. There's going to be 12 different hardware pieces, interfaces, all of this stuff. Because otherwise you're going to move into this sort of utilitarian kind of, almost, sort of communist kind of like, we all use the same interface. And then so I don't know if it's going to move to that, because there's always going to be things that are boutiquey enough for individual people, Pooh Ninja says, tell me you weren't excited when you saw that big encoder wheel on the Eventide for the first time. Oh yeah, it was great. I mean, I still,
so cool.
Where is my H9000? I was in the other room. I got the H3000 over there. There it is. It's that one thing on the bottom there. I mean, I love all that stuff. I love it. Bring it on.
Yeah, so that's so cool. Thanks, Warren. We've got another question from our community. So Doug says, what direction do you believe popular music will go in the future? I mean, that's like a how long is a piece of string sort of question, I'm guessing,
I think one of the problems, it's going back to earlier questions where we were talking about the perception of the right and wrong, this is good, that's bad, and how we don't really believe that that's a fact, that there's so much music within all the different things. I think one of the things is Queen are one of the biggest bands in the world. Even now, they're in the top 50 most streamed artists in the world. 25 years after they last put out a proper album, maybe 26 years now after, the album they finished up, Made in Heaven, with Freddie after he died. Or was it not? Whatever. But 20 plus 26 years, something like that. And because of that, there they are. They don't seem to need pop radio. And I think that this is one of the things that sort of it does irk me a little bit when I see so much emphasis put on pop radio as though that's the be all and end all, when this music is being consumed in greater amounts than ever before. You only, please, everybody go and Google music business, how much money it made last year. It was a bumper year, made more money than it's ever made before. It's back up to the highs of like 2003, 2004, which was the last hurrah for CDs when we were in like high billions. It's back up there. There was a drop off. So the money is flowing. And it's not all Justin Bieber as much as channels, people want to like rip on like the modern pop music and blah, blah, blah. It's actually not. That is only a fraction of what's being consumed. There's so much other great music being consumed, and better still, all this classic music that people are going back to. I think it's a fallacy to believe that, that great music is going to disappear because of current pop music, because of auto-tune or gridding or whatever you're always constantly told, because it didn't, and then when people say to me, well, the Queen movie, I go to them, you know what? I've been a Queen fan since I was a little kid, and I can tell you they've been in the top 100 most streamed artists since streaming started. They're just popular. The Queen movie helped, but they still were in that top 100. And we're talking millions and millions of artists who released records. They're not going anywhere because they wrote I Want to Break Free, Another One Bites the Dust, Don't Stop Me Now, Bohemian Rhapsody, hit after hit after hit after hit. So if you want one thing to guarantee that you're going to be around forever, write freaking really good songs.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Oh, thanks so much for that, Warren.
So modern pop music, it's a tough one. For modern pop music, it's like, I'm always cautiously optimistic. For every Beatles, there was Herman's Hermits. Nice band, don't get me wrong, but Everybody's Going to the Moon or whatever it's called, was a massive hit in the UK, like either side of a couple of Rolling Stones and Beatles songs. But nobody's talking about Herman's Hermits like they're talking about the Beatles and the Stones. So there's always been derivative. It's just unfortunate that the pop charts don't have artists outside of a certain small genre. But Queen could have disappeared in the very late 70s very easily, because their sound was big and bombastic and 6 and 7 minute tunes and like virtuosity and grandiose, incredible production. Punk comes along, kicks everybody's butt. Then post-punk almost immediately afterwards, and then new wave and new romantics, and don't forget ska, all in a period of like 5 years. So much change. And in 1980 they put out The Game, and they had a disco song. They had a 50s song. I know people to this day that think Crazy Little Thing Called Love is an Elvis song that Queen covered. I had somebody say to me, well, wasn't that an Elvis song? I mean,
what?
Seriously.
Really?
My point is like such diversity on one record. And then they had like the traditional kind of Save Me, the old school Queen, and Dragon Attack, The Rock. Diversity, genres, breaking down barriers, doing it all. Massive pop songs. Another One Bites the Dust is one of the most streamed, played, downloaded, blah, blah, blah songs of all time. So it's not about fashion. It's about really good music. So if you're in a death metal band or a punk band or a pop band or you're whatever it is, whether you program your music, play it live, combine it, whatever it is, just write really, really good songs and you'll get on the radio. It's not, so it's just, this is one of those things. It's like when bands tell me that, they'll send me their songs and I'll be like, you got to write some better songs. You need to work on your material before you go in the studio. It's,
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I do, yeah. It's like with when I know that you work with the Fray and you just discovered the Fray. Is that right?
No. So what happened is I was there right at the beginning. So there was a guy who worked in research at Epic.
Yeah.
And what happened is so they have research at labels. Nowadays it's Shazam, by the way. It's Shazam. So if you can get a lot of Spotify plays, you can get stuff streamed or whatever. What will happen is people go, oh, what's this song? And they go, Siri, what's this song? And now it's going to tell me There's no song. It says, hang on, let me listen. Okay. But so the Shazam. So that's what they do now. And they'll find like, oh, there's this song playing, gets a lot of plays. A lot of people are Shazamming it in Belgium or something. So they see these little blips and then they go and listen to the song. And if it's a really great song, they'll find out more. They'll search out the band. They'll search out the artist. They'll search out whatever it might be. It's not all just TikTok, which is what all I'm hearing from YouTubers is like, everything's about TikTok these days. It's not. No. I've been in those meetings. It's not all about TikTok. It's definitely about whatever works. Yeah. So, but back in the days of the fray, what they would do is they would have a research person who would sit there and scour through all of radio plays in different markets. And what happened is Aaron Johnson, who was the original producer on the band, had done some demos with the band, and they had got played on the local Denver radio station, and it had connected. And so they started off on like the locals only, and then they started sneaking into like normal daytime rotation. And Denver's a pretty decent sized market. Then they started playing out and doing a handful of shows here and there. And before you know it, they're headlining the Fox Theatre, and they don't even have an album out. They just have like a little EP. Sorry, there's a squirrel just walked down the stairs in front of the studio. It's gorgeous. Like, the squirrel just goes tick, 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 down the stairs in front of me. So, anyway, so the beauties of living in Laurel Canyon. But we have hummingbirds as well. So sometimes when that window's open, you see like a hummingbird like sitting in front of the window.
Really? Oh,
yeah, it's awesome.
Love that. Nice.
But anyway, to cut a long story short, so there was this kid in research, and he looked at and he saw this blip in the local, I think it was like a tri-state area, 2 or 3 states, that started getting radio play of this band. And so he goes into an A&R meeting and says, I heard this song, it's getting a lot of play in the local area, and it was Cable Car, I never knew there was on a view. Yeah. And then Mike Flynn flew out to see them play live. I think it was actually the Fox Theatre. So he's like blown away. He walks into like a 1,500 seater, like local band playing in like a 1,500 seater, which is a big deal. And it's packed full of kids. And they came to see their local band, the band that they went. And that was it. That's what got them signed. So he comes back to me and he has a cassette. Just not pre-CDs, but just like when people used to send cassettes. And I'm sitting in his Ford F-150 truck that he had in those days. And we're sitting in the parking lot and he plays me Cable Car. And he's like, what do you think? And I was like, this is genius. This is like roots Americana, because you feel like, because Isaac had, I never knew, had like a really American sounding voice, but it had like the piano work of something a little bit more contemporary UK, sounded like it could have been Keane. Some people say Coldplay, which is quite amusing because when I eventually did work with them, they'd never heard any of those bands. And I mean it. They didn't know anything about it. Oh, they grew up very different. They were church kids. They were church kids. So all they listened to was like worship music. They didn't know anything about like modern pop music. I'm sorry, Ben, if you're watching and I'm embarrassing you, the drummer. He's a good friend of mine. Sorry, embarrassing you, but they didn't. They were discovering these new bands. They discovered Coldplay on the second album. On the second album, we were playing that Viva La Vida. We were playing that in the studio. Yeah. We were mixing the record going, oh my God, they just put out this new album. And we were like, oh, I hope our album does well against this, But anyway, that's my point. It's Keane was a band that came up a lot in conversation. But my point is like, that's how it works. That's how it happens. People don't listen to music, except for us, producers, engineers, and mixers. We don't listen to music and the boost and cut. That's a technical skill that we need to teach. But it's not the overall, it's not the be all and end all of being in music and doing this for a living.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Thanks so much for that, Warren. That's so amazing. So with, this is one for you as well. Albums, right? So at the minute, obviously, as you said, TikTok. And, everyone says, oh, this generation is ADHD, they only listen to, because they've got so many options. I think the stats are, you've probably seen them with like 60,000 songs released to Spotify every day, or whatever the crazy figure is. But it's like, do you think, obviously been a massive Queen fan and, they did amazing albums, completely, one of the best bands of all time. But do you think albums are as relevant as what they were? nowadays? Do you think that artists should still keep making albums? Do you feel? Well, do bands even have budgets for making albums these days?
Well, those are all very different sort of questions and different answers.
Sure.
Yes, I really believe in making records. I really do. I think it's super important to make albums. Now, does it mean that you should just concentrate on that? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends on the genre of the artist. Ultimately, singles are what are going to get you noticed in a certain format, and albums can get you noticed in a different way. And I think I'm working with an artist. I'm going to be working with an artist soon that has a very conceptual idea about what they're going to do with their music. The music's a little progressive. It's going to have some songs that are going to have lyrics, and a lot of it's going to be instrumental. And he was asking me, we were driving back, we had a lunch break, and we were talking about, all of the ideas before we started tracking. And I was driving back up to the studio, and I said to him, he's a very smart person. I'm like, you're very intelligent, very successful. And I'm like, this has to feel like that. Yeah. This has to be the whole package. You need album artwork, which is beautiful, that sends a message. The lyrics need to be powerful and send a message. So basically what we ended up with is like, yes, for him, it's an album. It's a piece of work, a body of work. It's making a point. He's very passionate about climate change, and he's been involved in a lot of businesses that are really positive towards towards combating that. And that's what his kind of MO is. So I'm just like, then you need this to be in your lyrics. You need this to be in your music, the artwork, everything has to be that. And I was like, people are going to meet you because of your success in your chosen field. And then you can hand them a piece of art, a piece of music that makes sense to who you are. And that will be a success. So there's different criteria for different people. Now, if you're a 13-year-old girl singer, working in a studio for the first time, and your producer working with that, you've got to think completely differently. Doing an album is a complete and utter waste of time. You need to be looking for the song, the hit, something that announces this person. So I think that therein lies the question. And then those are the two extremes, and then bands and artists fall in between in different places. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I really think there is no one answer to that question. I mean, you can make a video saying don't do albums, and that will get 1 million views, and then you could do another video saying why you should do albums, and that will get 1 million views, because they're very polarized kind of opinions. But again, getting back to what we've been joking about the whole time, it's just not what we're about. We're not about polarizing people and creating divisiveness, even though we know that succeeds really well. It just doesn't make sense. Let's be positive and help people out, connect people rather than divide and conquer.
Absolutely, completely agree with you. Thanks so much, Warren. I've got to ask you as well, in your studio, I know that obviously, been a reviewer as well as an educator and as well as producer and engineer. What are some of your favorite toys in the studio, like kind of EQ and compressor wise? I know it's a bit geeky, but we all obviously love that sort of stuff. But what sort of stuff do you love working with?
I think that that it's interesting. I asked Hugh Padgham that because he's one of my favorite engineers and producers that ever lived. And I asked him that, and he said an 87 or a 57. But he said predominantly an 87. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Kind of a utilitarian, high quality, large diaphragm condenser. So it just, the answer to your question would be like, how much have I got to spend? Because I could probably get away with one of the many microphones I champion, like the Lewitt 640 TS is one of the best utilitarian mics there is. It does every single job. It's inexpensive. It can be a stereo mic. It can be a mono mic. It can be everything. And I'm a huge fan of that mic. And it's like $6.99 or something. I'm a huge fan of BAE. I use the 1028, which is basically a 1073, but with different EQ points. On pretty much everything. It's on every vocal we've ever recorded. When I'm not demoing a different piece of gear, that's the piece of gear I use. I love 1073s, but I also love DBX 160, the VUs, but I'll use any 160s I can get my hands on, even the XT or the Xs, and I love 1176s. So basically, you could give me something like a 1073 with either a 57 or a good mid-price condenser, and give me a 160 into 1176, I'll be happy, or just an 1176, and then we're good. It's like 90% of the recording these days is one chain. Once you've got the drums tracked and the basics, you can do all your overdubs with just a single mic pre and compressor.
That's so cool. Thanks, Warren. I know it's really interesting, like talking to quite a few engineers. They've told me that, like you do, it's like, I'm guessing that you use the outboard maybe for tracking and all the preamps and all that sort of stuff. But yet, do you tend to, when you're doing your mixing, are you predominantly in the box, or are you printing stuff as well, or how do you tend to like to mix?
I think it depends on what the end result is. We're doing a rock record at the moment where they want it to be modern, but they also want it to be Aerosmith. So it's hybrid. So I'm using a lot of, like, a little bit more slam, make it more aggressive in the box, but then coming back through the console to just give it to breathe a little bit. It's kind of a balance between the two. It's getting that to work together. Yeah. And so that becomes kind of the secret sauce, is really like, where do you go? If you stay in the box, you can be super, super modern. And I just did that live mix of the Jared James Nichols, and it was like a live hour and a half mix. To be honest, I feel like my in the box mix wasn't perfect because it was only a quote unquote quick mix, but I think it beat the SSL in that situation. So horses for courses, I found I was doing less in the box than I was on the console, which is strange. On the console, I found I was like falling back on EQ and compression on the channel strips on the SSL, just kind of as standard. And then I started listening back and going, it sounds like I've done too much work. Where's the integrity of the original recording? And when I open up the files inside of the box, I just did some high passing and a little bit of boost on this and a gentle bit of compression on that. And then before you know it, I'm like, this sounds better. This sounds fuller. This sounds bigger. So it's an interesting one, having tools is incredible, and having tools can be a disaster.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I've got to ask as well, Warren, with your guitar collection as well. Again, I know it's like choosing a favorite child, but what are maybe a couple of your favorite guitars in your studio to track with?
The ones that I'm getting a lot of love from, I'm rotating between 3 at the moment for everything, and it's the Yamaha Revstar.
Amazing.
It is an absolute favorite of mine, and they start them at like $500 or $600. Even this one, which is the kind of made in Japan, like blah blah blah, top of the range, still only $1,500.
That's awesome.
And the main one that we were using for the longest time is the gold one, which was $699.
Yeah. So
I love that. And don't get me wrong, I have some beautiful guitars. I have some very expensive guitars. I have a guitar that Eddie gave me, one of his guitars.
Really?
Yeah, I have a guitar. I have a Les Paul Custom, the Budokan custom shot one that Ace Frehley gave me. Another great guitar. So I have very expensive guitars, but I don't always use them. So, and then the Baxendale. Can you pass me the Baxendale, please, Connor? The Baxendale is like my only real boutique guitar that I use ever. Scott Baxendale is one of my favorite. I think one of my favorite people. He builds beautiful guitars, and this is a Cooley caster. It's Mike Cooley's guitar.
And that's nice.
And it's got a Charlie Christian pickup in the front.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name. It's a Lala pickups in the back. It's quite high output. It's quite. It's got a lot of bite.
Really nice action as well, one would imagine.
Yeah, it's a little bit higher set up than the Les Paul. It's not the Les Paul, the Revstar. I use it instead of a Les Paul. But it's good because you can.
Amazing.
You can really get in there and bend,
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you ever tried a triple? I've got a guitar that my friends and we built. So you mentioned about you and your dad that you built a guitar back in the day.
Yeah.
We just did it for fun. So we basically merged like a Firebird body with like a Fender Japanese neck. What we did is we put a I'll show you quick.
Yeah, grab it. I'm gonna grab the last one. I said there was 3. I'll grab the last one now.
Cool.
This is the last one quickly. It's the PRS Baylor. Yeah. This is a superb guitar. This gets a lot of play. Now this is the slinkiest guitar I've ever owned in my life.
Nice.
It's super slinky. There's so my doctor, his son, my doctor is a guitar player. He worked at Woodstock when he was a teenager, the festival.
Oh, really?
And he played guitar and he plays pedal steel and lap steel.
Yeah.
He played in the Chambers Brothers, for anybody here is old enough to know who the Chambers Brothers are.
Yeah.
And he plays with a lot of incredible musicians. And his son, it sets up guitars, and he took this, and now it's just like an absolute dream to play. And to be honest, this is probably one of the best guitars I've ever owned. And it's American made. I think it's about $1,500. So it's not like a $4,000, $5,000 PRS. Yeah. It's still made in America. It's all the things I like. So it's like a thin line. It's hollow. Nice. It's a glued neck, but it still sustains.
Brilliant.
Most glued neck Les Pauls, when you get high up, they choke. They just die. They just go meh. This still sustains.
That's amazing. I always as a kid, I loved the PRSs, because obviously I grew up in the 90s, but then obviously went into the new metal thing, and obviously there's loads of bands like Hoobastank, and I think it was Limp Bizkit and all those bands. They were all playing PRSs, and so I always literally I was just drooling over PRSs. It's really quick. So this was just for fun. We went around a timber yard. We kind of bodged this together, this guitar. But what I was going to show you is it's got a triple shot Seymour Duncan pickup. So I don't know if you've ever used the triple shot. So it's like a single coil P90, and you flick a switch and it turns into a humbucker as well, which is really fun. So let me see. I want to see this guitar of yours. Yeah, it's cool. It's literally we just bodged it together. So again, he built the body. So we went around a timber yard together and literally just built it. Put like a Bigsby trem on it, but then it's got like a proper Fender neck on it as well. Jazzmaster neck.
Is it so Jazzmaster, not like a double eagle?
No, it's Jazzmaster neck that we decided to bang on it. But the other bargain that and I've never driven down. I don't know if you've ever driven through Manchester before. Never driven down the M60 so fast, but there was M6. Sorry, but there was a guy that was selling an Epiphone Les Paul Custom Pro, and obviously they're about 500, 600 quid. I don't know what that is in dollars, whatever. But he was literally, because the neck was broken, he'd glued the neck back together. This guy worked at next door to PMT. He put it up on Facebook for 60 quid. So wow. I've never driven down the road so quickly with the case. So I always say to people that, the case is probably about 60 quid. So technically I got a free guitar out the deal, so
that's amazing. It was a Les Paul?
It was an Epiphone Les Paul Custom Pro, but again, there's still about, like 600 quid, I don't know what that is in dollars, $800, whatever. But yeah, it's just absolutely bonkers. That's so cool, though. Got to ask you as well before you go, amps, I know that obviously, you love your technology and you love your analog stuff equally as well. But with amps, amp sims, is there any way that you like to approach when you're recording guitar, when you're tracking? How do you tend to approach your tracking? Do you go for amps or do you go for sims or a bit of both?
Well, the sims I haven't yet, outside of metal, because in sims in metal just win hands down, because it's just wall of it's just like massive. Having said that, I've got, again, name drop, but it's true, Eddie gave me one of his amps, so I've got one of his own personal amps, and it sounds absolutely phenomenal for that wall of guitar. But I think that the sims that I use is I actually love my Deluxe Reverb amp, but it's the Tone Master, so it's the digital one. It is phenomenal. I use it all over the place, and nobody knows that it's that. They just see the Deluxe and they don't realize that it's actually not. It's digital. It actually doesn't have tubes in it, and it sounds phenomenal. So and the thing I learned years and years and years ago was I've created my own impulse responses of all of my cabs and stuff like that. So now I can put those impulse responses on anything, and suddenly the amp sounds great. Because I've got one of Vivian Campbell's old Marshalls, And so I've got his Marshall head and cap. And the funny thing is we opened it up when I made the impulse responses and realized that it had 30-watt speakers in it, not vintage 30, but 30-watt when they were still new, when they weren't called vintage 30. So it was pretty funny. So it has like the original speakers in it, and the amp sim on it is just absolutely superb. The IR, sorry. The IR on it's absolutely superb. So I'm sort of in this position where I can just do whatever I want and always get back, Mary, have you got my amp sim pack, my IR package? You'll absolutely love it.
I'll have to try it, Warren, because to be fair as well, so I originally had the Helix, like an idiot decided to sell it, but then actually came across the Pod Go as well. So realized that could do all the IRs as well. And I didn't realize, like, for a cheap price that pretty much is a similar engine with that, HX and can you do IRs as well?
All my IRs are available because I own Lancaster Audio, so all the IRs from Lancaster Audio are on there. So I've got hundreds of them on there. So with loads of different, So I forget to talk about it because I'm always so busy. But you can download any IRs you want from there, and we've got some amazing ones. Plus we've got like Cameron Webb, so you've got all the Motorhead ones, so you can get all the Motorhead IRs. We've got Bob Marlette, so that's like Sabbath, and he's worked with everybody. Tony Iommi solo, only Ozzy Osbourne solo. All of that stuff. Yeah. So LancasterAudio.com. And we've got more coming. We've got a collection of Marshalls which will blow people's faces off. I think it's like 100 cabs coming. There's lots and lots of stuff coming. So, so I do love that world. I don't talk about it enough because I'm usually so busy trying to do what I have to do. It's like, as you're pointing out, we do move in all kinds of different directions. It's like there is no one size fits all. It's super, super important for us to make sure that we are, that we're showcasing all genres and all kinds of stuff. Look, and I know that's very ambitious, like I keep saying, but to me, it's like I grew up on Iron Maiden as well, Number of the Beast, so I love that stuff just as much as I love, Billie Holiday, like I put out today. To me, it's all valid. I love it all.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Warren. I've got to ask you as well, what's next on your journey? I know obviously you've got the Academy and you do all these amazing courses, and I know some of the guys that do courses with you as well online, and there's so much amazing content out there. But what's next on your journey? You've gone through this incredible journey from obviously like, producing engineering and then produce like a pro, and it's obviously growing. So what's next for you?
I have a book coming out. Of course I do.
You do you?
I've written a book. Yes.
Amazing.
So there's a book coming out hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Brilliant.
Totally self-financed, didn't go to any publishers whatsoever, didn't even talk to any. I have a few friends that have done books with publishers, and all they did was tell me that they made up $175, and yet everybody says they have their book. So I was just like, we'll just own our own book, we'll put it out. My very, very good friend, Mr. Jerry Hammock, who wrote all the Beatles recording books, he and I got together, and over about the last 2 years, we've written this book, and it's all about recording and everything you need to know, and it's huge.
Amazing.
It's going to be a lot.
Brilliant.
So the book's coming out. So everybody get it for your Christmas stockings.
Yeah, absolutely. My son's 4. Maybe I could read it to him for like bedtime reading as well. I'm sure I can get
Well, placing the microphone at a 45-degree angle. Yeah, I can. Actually, it might work. It'll probably send him to sleep really quickly.
I'll be happy, but sorted. Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much, Warren. But no, really appreciate your time. Anything that you want to leave us with today? Anything else that you've got going on?
Well, I mean, just total. Yeah, if you're new and you don't know who I am, go check out producelikeapro.com and just sign up for the email list, join the Academy, all of the above. We have tons of courses. Go check out Pro Mix Academy, you name it. Yes, Doug, I want everybody in. Hopefully everybody in the Academy will buy one. I think it would be amazing. I'm very excited by it. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
A lot of fun.
Thanks so much. What I'll do, I'll let our guys know in our community, guys and girls in our community, know about the book as well, to get those guys to check it out as well.
As soon as I get one, I'll get you one, and hopefully you can kind of give it a nice positive review and all that stuff. I'm not doing any traditional media on it. It's just going to be we're putting out a book, and here's our community, and it covers everything that we talk about, you know, keeping it like that. It's all a culmination of all the questions and everything that I get asked, you know, in one place. And there will eventually be a whole online kind of thing built around, you know, ideas and stuff on there as well, all which will be integrated. I mean, Produce Like a Pro, as far as I'm concerned, is in its infancy. You know, we've got so much more. I mean, so much more to do. I mean, we'd like to have you more involved. I mean, you're always great. Now you're off doing your own thing. Come back and join us and be involved. I need I need some more smart and enthusiastic people. I mean, that's what it's all about. You know,
thanks so much. It's brilliant, you know. And to be fair as well, you know, what kind of inspired me in the first place. To be fair, I actually come originally from the finance world, so I interviewed 5 people a day as part of my job working in a bank. But then decided to just give that a go in the audio world as well. And it's just lovely, you know, to interview guests like you, Warren, and all the other pros that we've had a chat with as well, and for people to very graciously give their time. But you know, it's so amazing, to watch you and other interviewers interview amazing people and amazing engineers, and people to enjoy the education of it and enjoy the fun stories. And it's fun and exciting, you know, and that's
so much fun.
Surely that's the reason why we do it, you know, because it's fun and exciting, and we eat, sleep, and breathe it, you know.
I agree. Yeah, it's going back to what we first talked about when Dave Pensado interviewed me, right at the beginning, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah,
it was him that brought it up. He just said, "Yeah, it is. You've got to live, eat, and breathe it. It's you either do music or you don't. There's no oh, you know, I occasionally write a hit song. It's no." I was talking to Desmond Child yesterday, who's one of the greatest songwriters of all time, one of the most successful songwriters of all time. You know, wrote "Living on a Prayer." You know. Shot through the heart, not to blame, you gave love.
Bad name.
But he didn't just write those. He wrote massive songs for everybody. He wrote "Janie's Got a Gun." You know, cool. It's just hit after hit after hit. An incredible writer. And he said he wrote 5,000 songs in his career.
What?
So, you know, as much as you can name drop, I think he said 80 top 40 singles, which is huge.
Yeah.
You know, there's not many people that have 80 top 40 singles around the world. So he's got 80 top 40 singles, a whole bunch of number ones all over the world.
Yeah.
But 5,000, he said, think about it. 5,000. He's 5,000 songs. I can't remember how many he said got cut. So maybe 200 get onto albums, and then 80 are top 40, and then 10 number ones or whatever it is. The point is if I was to tell you you're going to have 10 number ones, you know that you're going to be one of the biggest songwriters that ever lived.
Yeah.
But it's 5,000 songs to get to that 10. He's very open about it. Carole King said that she wrote 300 songs before she wrote a good one, and not a hit, just a good one. And I said that to Desmond, and Desmond said, "Wow, she got there quick."
Yeah, I've just seen that.
Cool.
That is amazing. So cool. It's just great, you know, to kind of just as I've looked obviously over your discography, and it's so nice to see some of the bands. Oh, Eve 6 as well. And not a lot of people in the UK know about Eve 6. And I've seen you work with those guys. So obviously I remember discovering Inside Out and all that sort of stuff. Was it a single you worked on with those guys? Was it?
Yeah, we did a single. It was I was gonna say a comeback single, but it's quite funny because it's probably 10 or 15 years ago now. But you know, it was early 2000s, and you know, I've been jumping no doubt, inside. You know, that was mid-late 90s. So it was probably 5 or 6, 7 years after that. So it was a quote unquote comeback single. They're interesting. I mean, the drummer I think is Don Was' son, isn't it? Yeah, it's Don Was' son.
Yeah.
So they're very musical. They come from rock royalty. The singer I believe is also the bass player. They were just a tight 3-piece power pop punk band, and great to work with, super positive, really good human beings. It was a great experience.
Awesome. And Korn as well. I know you worked on a Korn project, if that's right.
Yeah, I mixed a live album. It was called Live and Rare, and what it was, it's just to be really blunt, it was Korn had one more album to deliver to Epic Records, and so they recorded some of the stuff was recorded live at CBGB's. Believe it or not.
Oh, no,
yep. Yeah, so it's a tiny little club. So it was a live album. There was also some outtakes and B-sides from different that had never been released in one place before. So, but it was good. It was yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I've just been blessed. I mean, you know, I've worked with James Blunt, you know, on one side of it, Mattis Yahoo, all the way through to like Ace Frehley. I've done 3 albums with Ace Frehley.
Yeah.
You know, I've done 3 albums with like another legacy artist, Rick Springfield. I've done Aerosmith, The Fray, 2 albums and EPs and all their live stuff. For about 5 or 6 years, I was just doing everything Fray. We would like do all the iTunes past stuff, all of the live albums, all of that stuff, all the B-sides. I recorded Happy Christmas War Is Over with them. So I would do, so I've sort of always moved between rock, where I grew up, my passion, with kind of like the softer rock stuff, with the piano-driven stuff, because after the Fray got big, I got given a lot of records in that genre. It's what led me to James Blunt. It's what led me to Augustana, you know. But generally speaking, it's been a plethora of stuff, you know, and it was great to come back to Aerosmith. Aerosmith got me back into like rock more. So I did, you know, those Ace Frehley albums. It's just like, you know, I had a day here where Slash came to my house, sat on the couch on the other side of this computer screen here, and did a dueling guitar solo with Ace Frehley on a cover of Emerald, which is Thin Lizzy, one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
Then after the session, Ace goes back home to San Diego, where he was living at the time. And the next day he calls me. He goes, that harmony guitar part, you know, in Emerald. He's like, you play it.
Yeah.
I was like, you sure? He's like, yeah. You know, I'm not gonna be able to get down. You do it for me. So I played the harmony guitar part, put it into the song. Album comes out like 3 months later. It says guitars Slash, Ace Frehley, and Warren Huart.
That's awesome. Love that.
Yeah,
that is very, very cool. It's one to kind of like, you know, when you're like kind of in your 80s, go, guess what I did, kids? You know, it's like kind of, it's one to like kind of tick off like the bucket list. Have you still got a couple of artists that you'd still love to work with? Brian May, maybe walk through the door? Would you?
Of course,
yeah.
Brian May, of course. Yeah.
So cool. No, Warren, but thanks again for your time today.
Thank you. I'm going to rush off to the bathroom.
No problem. Amazing. So we'll end the live. But again, yeah, absolutely. Go check out Warren's amazing academy. We all obviously know Produce Like a Pro. Definitely go there. And then obviously you've got our community, Produce, Mix, Fix, and Conquer on Facebook, but on YouTube. So we're a Diddy little channel, Diddy little community, but full of like loads and loads of awesome engineers. So yeah, thanks again, Mr. Warren Huart. Appreciate your time, sir.
You rock. Yes, please come and join us and Produce Like a Pro. We'll make sure Rich is back in and helping out as well. Let's keep the positiveness coming, Rich.
Absolutely, man. So what I'll do, feel free to hang. I know you need to lip to a loo, Warren, but feel free to hang just for 20 seconds. Going to end the live now, but thanks again for joining, everyone.